Great to have you with us, everybody. This is your host, Jim Masters. Thanks for joining us. We are live worldwide right now on the Jim Masters Show Live. And how was your holiday weekend? Did you have a good weekend wherever you were watching maybe some fireworks? Maybe you were at home watching fireworks on TV. Perhaps you just had a nice, quiet barbecue with family and friends. It is a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for all the great comments, everybody. It's a pleasure when we get a chance to meet so many fantastic folks who are absolutely loving this entertainment lifestyle talk show series that now we are entering our 10th week of. That's right. This is our 10th week. Now, many of you know I'm a professional television radio host and journalist and actor, voiceover artist, writer, producer, stage MC, and I've been doing it for a long time. And for a long time, viewers and listeners and even my colleagues have said, Jim, you should create something like this. So about 10 weeks ago, that is exactly what we did. We put it all together and here we are today. And it's so fantastic to have an opportunity to welcome you and welcome you and welcome you. And we have been welcoming folks literally from all around the world who have been experiencing some really cool episodes. We've had extraordinary people from the worlds of television and film, movies, Broadway as well. We've also had inspirational folks and chefs and scientists and doctors and comedians, just about everybody you can think of. And we have an incredible week of guests joining us on the show. In just a moment, I'm going to introduce a spectacular guest, David Bigelow, who is actually a child actor on the set of Jaws. That's right. But he's also a prolific and award-winning television producer and so much more. He's worked for years on projects with public television as well. But he's also been working on an extraordinary docudrama miniseries on the making of Jaws, Making the Monster. And it really is extraordinary. We were just talking about it before we went live on the air. He's going to join me in just a second. We have so many incredible folks going to be joining us. Broadway veteran Karen Mason is joining me on tomorrow night's show. Stephen Mosher on Wednesday, Rennie Katz on Thursday, and then on a Friday, Stanley Livingston is joining us. Stan Livingston played Chip on My Three Sons. And then on Saturday, Chloe Agnew, who I've interviewed multiple times on public television, dear friend, she's joining us for a special Saturday night show. And of course, you know her from Celtic Woman. And she also just recently had toured before everything that's gone on this spring and summer. She was touring with another great performer from Ireland, Nathan Carter. And there was a public television special that aired last year, and they were going on tour in reference to various cities that they were visiting all over the United States and Canada and around the world with that tour. So Chloe Agnew, who's another incredible artist, she's going to be joining us and performing as well Saturday night. But let me tell you about the guest we have here. First of all, as you know, we always do a toast. We welcome our audience all around the world, United States, Canada, Europe, Asia, Australia. We have guests and we have viewership that reaches the masses, and we appreciate that. It's a blessing to have all of you here. And of course, we have all of our regulars here, but I know you love when I bring out the George Burns. He is sort of my sidekick. If you don't know what this is, we had a nostalgic week a couple of weeks ago, and this was my aunt's. She collected him on his 100th birthday, the commemorative doll, and there he is with a cigar and his smile. He sees all of you and you and you and you from all around the world. He's sort of my Ed McMahon on this entertainment lifestyle talk show series. So he's here. He says hello to all of you as well. We have comments from viewers already. When I mentioned that my guest, David Bigelow, was going to be joining us here on the program, so many of you were so excited and you were already asking, when is it going to air? And we're talking about that fantastic docudrama. Well, that's still in production. We're going to be talking about that and giving you updates on that as we go along. But again, how many of you remember being in the movie theater when Jaws was playing? Dun, 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 dun. All you have to do, you don't even have to do the full thing. All you have to do is go, dun, dun. That's it. And everybody already, they gasp. And if you're in the water and you're with friends and they go, dun, dun, everybody looks around. It's just an iconic movie. Steven Spielberg, of course, the incredible imagination of Steven Spielberg and an extraordinary crew. And my guest, David Bigelow, was actually on set. as a 5-year-old kid. And he's going to be talking about that experience. He's also going to be talking about his prolific work in television, working on Frontline on PBS and so many other projects. And then also this really near and dear to his heart project, Making the Monster. It's really going to be a phenomenal project, and I can't wait for it to come to fruition. And so many people are already asking about it. So it's an honor and pleasure to have him here. First, show you a couple of pictures, and then we're going to introduce him to the show. Again, it's always a pleasure when we have an opportunity to welcome folks who are really doing incredible things. Making the Monster. Yes, there he is as that little kid. And some wonderful shots. And we're going to talk about these shots as we go along here. During the course of our conversation and what they all mean. But this really is extraordinary. The Ultimate Jaws Location Guide, the most comprehensive map of locations for one of the greatest films of all time, including Jaws, Jaws 2, Jaws the Revenge. And does this look familiar? And that, and I bet that does. Again, let me tell you about my very special guest. He's extraordinary, and it's a real honor and a pleasure to have him here on the show. You're in for a real treat, folks. Those of you who like nostalgia, those of you who love movies and film, those of you who love Steven Spielberg, or those of you who really love cool conversations. David's humble beginnings at 5 years old started when he appeared in Jaws as an extra during the Alex Kintner beach attack scene. His experience began his love of cinema and carried through to the present. He has over 25 years of experience in media and entertainment, working with broadcasters, filmmakers, musical groups on arena tours, and is currently an online editor and colorist with PBS's flagship station, WGBH Channel 2 in Boston, Massachusetts. He's in the midst of producing a live-action docudrama about the struggle to make Jaws back in 1974 for television called Making the Monster. He's also the co-creator of the Ultimate Jaws Location Guide, recently released on Google Earth for Jaws. That's right. He's the co-creator of the Ultimate Jaws Location Guide, and it was recently released on Google Earth for Jaws fans around the world. Just recently, he began the Return of the Orca project, and that is the first step towards establishing a new and modern presence of Jaws tribute efforts, and will be using the vessel and an involved purpose for charitable causes and nonprofit educational and research-based efforts. David Bigelow is series creator and senior producer of Making the Monster, a docudrama series. And again, we are so honored to have him here on the show. He's going to be talking about what it was like to actually be on set during all of that. Could you imagine if you were a kid in the theater watching it come to life? You were scared. But it'd be interesting to find out if he was scared just seeing some of the things that they had to do to make it actually happen. It's an honor and a pleasure to welcome him here as my very special guest on the program. Again, we've got a flood of comments already in. We're going to take a look at those in just a minute. But first, let's welcome our very special guest, David Bigelow, live and direct from just outside Boston, Massachusetts. David, welcome to the show. It's an honor and pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
So what was it? You're very, very welcome. What was it like being on the set at that young age when we're talking about sharks and Jaws and all of this? It must have been pretty cool, but a little bit scary too, I would imagine, huh?
Well, what's interesting about what happened when the Universal Studios showed up on Martha's Vineyard back in 1974 was that we hadn't had many movies, and actually the location of Martha's Vineyard wasn't really the destination it is today. My family moved there. My father was an electrician and kind of found that there was a lot of opportunity to work on a small island, which had maybe about 8,000 year-round residents. Now that number is closer to 25,000, but back then there was fewer people. And so when the movie came, it was not really, it was an interesting development. It was a very economically depressed time for Martha's Vineyard and a lot of the country. And the only thing that Martha's Vineyard was known for really at the time was the Chappaquiddick incident with Ted Kennedy.
Right.
And so that was just a few years before Jaws showing up to do production there. So there was a little bit of a stigma with the island that had a bit of a scandal associated with it. When the production came to the vineyard, they came in like a storm. They moved into the Kelly House, a hotel in Edgartown that was struggling financially and had not probably would have gone under had it not been for the crew basically booking that place for what should have been a 55-day shoot that turned into 159. So 2 months became quickly 6 months of production on the vineyard. And, it was quite the money making venture for a lot of islanders who had businesses that were catering to the production. One of the things that was happening was they were casting a lot of local people. It was one of the first films that had gone off the lot, as they say, and decided that they would use the resources of the locals. And Steven Spielberg directed Sherry Rhodes, the casting director, to really seek out a lot of these personalities that would fit the roles and do a great job of being authentic in those roles. So there's a great deal of authenticity in Jaws that I think it would be hard to capture in actors playing roles. There's plenty of talented actors in the film, obviously, but there's a lot of character in people who never had acted before and haven't acted since. So I was 5 years old in Lee Fiero's drama class at Oak Bluffs Elementary. Lee Fiero is the actress who played Mrs. Kintner, the one who slaps Roy Scheider.
Right.
And so she told our class about the fact that she was cast in the movie, and they had a scene they needed to shoot with a whole bunch of kids in the water, and it was late April, early May. It was not warm water on Martha's Vineyard yet. It was quite cold still. But I was required as a new resident to go take swimming lessons at the beach, only about a mile and a half down from where that was being shot, the scene that she was shooting. So I finished my swimming lessons and then walked down. Actually, I hitchhiked part of the way. As a 5-year-old Martha's Vineyard, hitchhiking was not something I was unfamiliar with. But it was the 70s, and I was raised by hippies, and this was not something. Parents today, I'm sure, who are listening now are thinking, "Oh my God, a 5-year-old hitchhiking alone." And I'm a parent, and it certainly would terrify me. But back then, it was not something that we really were too concerned about. So went down to the set, and it was the beach set for the Alex Kintner scene. Huge lights, large crew, production trucks, everybody present, and it was intimidating. I didn't know what to expect. I just said, okay, I'm going to be here, but there's a lot of stuff going on, and I knew Lee. She was the only person there that I knew, and I kind of, she made me feel comforted, like everything was going to be fine. Lee was a very calming person. She ran the children's theater on Martha's Vineyard. She did the school education program for drama for the kids. And she was a very reassuring presence and was loved by thousands of people on the vineyard who she basically used acting and drama as a tool to basically express love and concern and an opportunity for kids. So anyway, Lee was there to help me along, and it was a long day. It was probably 5-6 hours in the water of going, and this is the scene where the boy is eaten off the raft, Alex Kintner. And every time that they blew that blood bag in the back for when he was going up and then sucked back down by the shark, we'd have to reset and wait for all that blood to dissipate in the water. So there was just these long periods of typical film production, hurry up and wait,
Right.
which also involved now waiting for the water to basically lose this blood bag color that we could then back and get in the water and shoot. And so we had wool blankets to keep us warm between takes, and we were being fed Fig Newtons and hot apple cider and things like that. And so we had a long day. I did see Steven Spielberg. I never interacted with him. That's something that I did, as an extra, typically the assistant director interacts with the extras, right, and the director interacts with the principal actors. So Lee Fiero and Alex Kintner, played by Jeffrey Voorhees, they were interacting. Roy Scheider was there, of course. So, assistant director Tom Joyner is the one who I interacted with, or at least took instructions from in a group. And I appear so quickly in the film. Honestly, if you blink, you'll miss me. It's the shot right after Roy Scheider is the dolly zoom, that famous dolly zoom when Alex Kintner is eaten in front of him, and then you see that really Hitchcockian sort of telescoping shot they call the Jaws shot, which actually was done first in Vertigo. That shot, and then immediately after that shot, you see a bunch of kids see the blood in the water, the football's floating in the water, and I'm in the left of frame, and a kid is in front of me, and then finally he dives, I dive, and you see my face briefly. So it's not very long. But you know, it was a really wonderful experience, and it did scare me that day. And then going to the theater that summer, or sorry, the following summer when they finally released it, you know, we had an island screening, and it was incredible. We were blown away. I expected, you know, I was watching Godzilla, I was watching monster movies.
Right.
That's what I expected. I didn't expect a terrifying thriller, and the artistry of that film into seducing you into knowing the shark was there by suggesting it because of all the problems, the barrels, the music. It really scared me. It scared a lot of people, and frankly, we thought there was going to be a dud on our hands when the film was taking so long to get done. But so in many ways, it was, you know, it really redeemed itself as an incredible film. And today, it's one of the most popular summer movies still for, you know, remembering the summer of the shark, and now we have sharks all over Cape Cod and the islands, and
Right.
it stays relevant somehow. And I think that's really incredible. That's a testament to a film who just doesn't seem to go away.
Now, were you scared to go in the water right after doing that film, working on that?
It was yes and no. It was a double-edged sword in that my imagination knew that a lot of things were, you know, the film was scary, but also I knew the beaches, and I saw
Right.
the shark at one point as, you know, the fake Bruce shark, the mechanical shark. And so I did, as a 5-year-old, understand that the artifice was present.
Right.
And I think a lot of other kids who wouldn't have seen that may have basically seen the film, and their imagination would run wild with it. And I had, certainly being impressed by the film, but seeing the shark and seeing the locations and all the film production around it, it did allow me to have a bit of a buffer between my imagination and reality. So it definitely, you know, I got in the water and I would look around and I would feel, you know, I'd hear the music going in my head. But I also felt somewhat safe because I knew it was just a movie, and I was impressed by that movie. But I was cognizant of the fact it was a movie.
I tell you, I think you and I were talking about it before we went live. One of the scenes that really stuck with me for years, and probably did for a lot of people, especially the kids, was when they were diving down below, and they found that sort of fisherman's boat shipwrecked below. And they're looking in, there's a little sort of like opening, and they sort of look in. And then before they get all the way to looking in, this sort of like almost skeleton figure of an old fisherman pops right out. That that was a good one. That was a good scare.
Yeah, that was an interesting story behind that. A lot of Jaws fans know this story. Some of your viewers may not be familiar with the story, but that was a shot that was picked up after they had left Martha's Vineyard and they were back in Los Angeles filming in post-production. And they did a test screening in Dallas, Texas. And that test screening, Spielberg got the idea, why don't we get one more scare? I think there's room for one more scare in this film. And they shot that shot in the editor's pool, Verna Field's pool, right next to her editing studio at her home in Los Angeles. That home is currently on the market. You can actually go and look for it, and it's advertised as the home of Verna Fields. And the pool is where the head popped out of Ben Gardner in the hull of that boat. The studio was done paying for Jaws at that point. They said, anything else you want, Steve, you need to go and take care of this. So Steve had a small cross section of the Orca's hull built. And in the pool, they poured milk in the water to get it cloudy and feel more ocean-like. And they molded a foam head of Ben Gardner, and they dropped it in there. So that shot, which is one of the most memorable of Jaws to many people, as it is to you, was one that they decided on a whim they would just get after they had done an initial screening. And then the following screening after that was done in the LA area. That shot resulted in a man running past Spielberg into the lobby and vomiting on the near the concession stand carpet. So it worked to him. Yeah. It was worth the extra, the $3,000 he spent out of pocket to get that shot in the can. To get that shot in the can. Well,
because it's still, I think I remember that. And then probably one of the other things that has stuck for years, and it has for many people, WPIX Channel 11 in New York City, at the opening of their Chiller Theater movie at 8 p.m. on Saturday nights, used to use this really funky, freaky, animated version, almost like a claymation in a way. It was very ahead of its time, version of this hand coming up out of a pool of blood. and the word chiller would appear, and you'd heard chiller, and then all of a sudden this six-fingered hand would just eat the words chiller and then just go back, and that was sort of the intro to whatever the movie was going to be. And sometimes the open was actually better than the actual flick that they showed. Kids remember that. They still talk about that. So there's certain things, you just remember. That's a true testament to quality. And time put in. So what were those days like? I mean, hours and hours on set, I would imagine, right, David?
Yes. Well, my time comprised of only that 6 hours or so. I remember starting in the morning and then going into the late afternoon. The thing about, one of the things about Jaws, my scene and many other scenes, because they shot everything on the beach scenes early in the season before tourism started up. They wanted to get everything in the can as far as the crowd beach shots that were casting locals, so that they didn't impact the local economy with the actual beachgoers who were going to Martha's Vineyard. Because, like I said, it wasn't a very popular destination as it is today, but it was a popular destination in New Englanders. And a lot of people were coming from Boston and New York and Connecticut. And now it's, people from all over the country and even the world come to Martha's Vineyard for those beaches. So a lot of times when I like to think that when you watch Jaws and you see the people running out of the water terrified, some of those faces are they're cold. They're just cold. They might be acting as well, and they're scared. But a lot of it is, the grimace that you show when you're cold is very similar to the grimace that you show when you're scared. And I think that that was just a happy accident, like many happy accidents on the production of Jaws. Yeah, it was. A lot of people were very well tuned into what was going on with Jaws, and locals. I know I've been in touch with a number of people who just work in the crafts or carpentry or painting or people who had a boat, and they were all hired by Universal to work on that film and did very well. And some people. One person I know basically still lives in the house that Jaws built on Martha's Vineyard. The money he made from that film basically provided him to build his home, buy the land, build the home, and now he's there to this day. So it has long-ranging ripple effects for the community of Martha's Vineyard, which I still I feel very close to. I've gone there ever since I lived there. I did move away probably about 1980. But to me, it's my childhood home, and it will always be that.
Now, no pun intended, but were you bitten by the acting bug at that point as a child? Did you want to pursue acting and make that a full thrust? Take us from there after Jaws wrapped and then that came out. Obviously you were still a kid, but was your family interested in pursuing for you the acting path, the performance part?
Not so much the acting path. I think that what happened was when I saw Jaws screened at the Island Theater in Oak Bluffs and was impressed by how it literally knocked the wind out of me. I walked out of that theater completely shocked to my core at how that film terrified me and not expecting it. And I think that's one of the things that happens when you expect one experience and you get a complete surprise. So in many ways, it really impressed upon me that filmmaking is not just, a cool little distraction, but has a real powerful connection to viewers that film certainly made with me. And that was the first experience I had with that. Acting wasn't really what I was thinking about. I enjoyed the process of seeing a film be made and noticed, it probably wasn't very conscious of me to think about at the time, but cinematography, score, acting, all of the components of great filmmaking and storytelling that was exhibited in that movie, I was really fascinated by. Now, Jaws became the first blockbuster in history, breaking $100 million at the box office, but it was unseated 2 years later by Star Wars. And Star Wars played in the exact same theater, and I went to see it at the Island Theater in Oak Bluffs. And at that point, I was hooked. Movies were everything to me at that point. And I think there's a lot of guys my age or even older who probably can relate to, and ladies, I'm not being completely sexist here. I'm just saying, I think that a lot of boys connected with those adventure stories. And, I went from the fascination with Jaws to now wanting to be Luke Skywalker. And then finally wanting to be Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And films at that point, the films of the 70s and 80s were the golden age of the blockbuster to me. I think
Yeah. Oh, sure.
what it's turned into has been, I don't see it as being necessarily a bad thing, but I don't think we have the magic that we had back
Mm.
then.
Hmm.
Marvel films, I enjoy Marvel movies. I enjoy, the Avengers and others. The Matrix was a really entertaining saga to me, at least the first one. But I think that the 70s and 80s, through the Star Wars films, through Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, John Landis, all these directors that created incredible rides, experiences that you felt completely immersed in. And
Hmm.
that's where I really began. Was I loved the idea of making stories come to life. And that's what those films impressed upon me,
Absolutely.
mostly.
Close Encounters, Poltergeist, and of course,
Absolutely. Close Encounters was
yeah,
fantastic to me.
even The Exorcist in the 70s as well. And then you had also in the 70s a lot of the big disaster movies, Poseidon Adventure and Earthquake and Towering Inferno and, Roller Coaster. I mean, there was all of these different, which was really Attacks of Bees and everything.
Or Airport 75, and all the airplane, or Black Sunday, there
Well,
was genre
well,
stories back then too.
Well, what's really interesting is I've said that, the only one that I think could have scripted some of what we've been dealing with in the last few months, just the monumental nature and so many different elements of life coming at us all at the same time, would be a Steven Spielberg or possibly in a series of novels by Stephen King or something, because it's been so extraordinary what we've dealt with, collectively and individually in our lives. So really, really, absolutely amazing. So it's really the film production, the creation side that bug is what bit you, and you sort of pursued it from there. Tell us about then how that led to your work in your illustrious career in television.
Well, I basically I went to college at University of Massachusetts, and I got into the film program that UMass had at the time was basically an art program. It wasn't like it is on the West Coast at the USC or other schools, Tribeca in New York and so forth. The program was an art program, and so I was just exploring cinematography and editing. I was shooting black and white film, 8 millimeter, and then editing that, literally reel to reel, splicing film together the old school way. And around the time I was graduating, the first Avid editing systems, the nonlinear editing systems, were making their appearance on the scene. And so the idea of being able to use a computer to edit footage and do, real great editing, and not have to worry about ruining your material because you were committing to actual physical negative, was really great. So I learned Avid editing, really early on, and did internships. I worked on a movie called Squeeze that was picked up by Miramax, and I worked for free for 7 months on that picture as an assistant editor. So I learned Avid editing on that, and then went on to do internships locally in Boston, and did corporates, industrials. You really, when you start out in editing or any of this, you take whatever jobs are available to you to learn the tools that you need to learn, and to make those tools something that become as your mastery as much as possible. So, I worked in the Boston area for a long time on a lot of different things, some music videos, some documentary work, and occasionally feature films. We didn't really have features being made in Boston like we do today, since the tax incentives that were enacted in 2012. Now we have movies and TV shows shooting here all the time, but back then it was a far and few between. But I formed a company with a couple partners, after having worked for a while with some staff positions with others, and worked actually in entertainment with live touring artists such as Guns N' Roses, Lady Gaga. We did ZZ Top's tour. We did the LED video wall graphics and animations.
Mm.
And so we went on tour with these artists for a little while, basically working with the lighting designer and making that show look beautiful. And it was really exciting and really fun. And but living out of a suitcase on the road does get a little tiring. And ultimately that part of my career ended. And then I basically got an opportunity at WGBH with The Outpost, which is their post-production arm, that is available for outside clients, but also does the in-house production group for Frontline, the Emmy Award-winning series, the documentary series that is all very news relevant. They've been on for almost I think since 1983, and have an incredible resume of work, a body of work that is fantastic, and is recognized to this day with a lot of incredible documentaries, and works with incredible people. So it's a collaborative process, and working with them has been a really great experience for me over the past 6 years. But we also do Nova and some American Experience. There's outside clients that come in. I just did a 3-part series about the creation of Pan Am Airways, and it's a docudrama in that it's part documentary, but also reenactments of characters actually from the 30s and 40s as Pan Am went across the Pacific, and how the challenges of actually getting, you can't fly across the Pacific back with those days. You had to find little islands to hop over and stop and fuel,
Right.
and then go and hop to the next island, stop and fuel. And so it was really interesting. It's really rewarding, and the content is, it's educational and information, and also can be very entertaining. And I think that I've really honed a set of skills working with some incredible people about creating content that is ready for anyone to watch, and there would be no excuses about the quality of it. It's as good as we could possibly make it by the time it hit the air.
Absolutely. I mean, many people know I've been with public television and helped PBS and public television various forums, generally as an on-air host. I did GBH, WNET, WLAW, Connecticut Public Television, national work with them. Fabulous, fabulous crew, fabulous organization. Been with them for a long time. Quality, through and through. And those broadcasts that you mentioned, some of my personal favorites as well on public television, but Nova and Frontline, extraordinary. American Experience, extraordinary. So thank you for all of the work that you do. And I've also hosted many a pledge drive over the years too, multiple pledge drives, auctions. So we've raised millions of dollars for public television programming and for those shows as well. Quality, some of the best. And so the Pan Am, I really think that sounds fantastic. That is, how did you get involved with that one? That's amazing.
Well, that's a client of the Outpost, my group, and I had worked with this same client based in Boston years before on a show called The Mystery of Matter. One of the first things I did for American Public Television. And so the client came back to work on this series. They had gone through years of fundraising to basically get that show into production, and had done a very similar approach, which was part interview based and then docudrama reenactments of those scenarios. So it's called Across the Pacific. I think it'll be airing in the next couple of months, or I'm not sure exactly the broadcast schedule, but Across the Pacific with Moreno Lyons Productions. Stephen Lyons was the writer-director, and Patricia Moreno is his wife and producer. Patricia actually worked with Julia Childs back in the day. She was part of Julia's team very early on.
Russell Morash and all of them.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. We just published at WGBH some archives of Julia, who was editing. Julia knew how to reel edit her television programs. And that's what it was. You were basically splicing tape like the way you would splice film. And Julia was very, very handy with that. It's almost like her chef skills translated into the editing room, which was, I had not known until I had just seen that recently.
Yeah, there was a lot of shows that came out of Boston and still do, and New York, and Zoom. Jim Crockett, remember Jim Crockett? Crockett's Victory Garden, before it became Victory Garden. So many cool shows. So with all of this leads us to Making the Monster. Tell us about how that developed. What was the seed of inspiration, David, that really got this idea flourishing?
Well, it's interesting. So, as I mentioned, I started working at WGBH about 6 years ago or so, and for many years I hadn't been thinking about my experiences on Jaws. It was just it was a bit of a footnote in my history. I'd been doing a lot of things since then, and I would go to the vineyard every summer and recall my experiences, but it wasn't really sort of part of the story I was telling about myself any longer. And when I got to WGBH and I mentioned to a colleague that, Jaws came up in conversation at some point. And I said, "Oh yeah, no kidding, I was in that movie." He was like, "Really? What do you mean?" I was like, I was in the scene where the kid gets killed on the raft. I was in the water with the football kids throwing the football around, and the blood bag bursts, and I jump out of the way. Yeah, I was in it. It's like you can't really see me. It's not like I'm credited or anything like that. So, but he knew this gentleman that I became good friends with, named John Campopiano. John is the archivist and rights manager for Frontline.
Hmm.
And John heard that I was in Jaws, and I think because I think he's the second largest memorabilia collector of Jaws in all of the United States. And he's very good friends with the number one most highest collector of memorabilia of Jaws in the country, Jim Beller. So John rushed over to my color grading suite with a section of the Orca hull that he had bought, a fiberglass section of the Orca 2, actually, the submersible Orca that he purchased from Susan Murphy on Martha's Vineyard, who with her husband, they basically worked on Jaws and the boats, and they took ownership of the Orca 2, and so they were selling off pieces of the hull after a while. John came and met me. He's couldn't you know we became fast friends, and at first I thought he was just going to throw me in a glass display case in his house because I might be the only person who worked with him that knew that that worked on the film, because John is a prolific collector, and he has a lot of memorabilia related to that film and other films, and so but I became introduced to the community of Jaws. Jim Beller, who I mentioned, who lives in Providence, Rhode Island, got to meet him. There's a whole lot of connections. I actually met a gentleman named Peter Spidetti that's a friend of theirs and who I'm a friend with now, who bought the fighting chair from the Orca at auction, the actual chair that Robert Shaw sat
Wow.
in. And he spent more than $30,000 on that wood chair at auction. And he also has one of the fins that were seen in the film and the production sign from the Jaws production offices that was held up over the door in Edgartown at their production office. So he owns some of the most incredible heirlooms from the actual filmmaking that you will find. So getting be friends with John and having lunches at WGBH while we were working together on projects and so forth, I just said, it just became the more we were talking about the film and the filmmaking part and what the crew went through, it became apparent to me that this was a story that hadn't been told. It had been told in documentary, but it had not been told in the lore of docudrama, which I thought was fascinating. And some of the projects I was working on were taking that approach, writing a script based on a historical event and having actors perform these roles of actual people, and letting you get a real, in some ways, the docudrama format creates a larger than life experience about it. And so I envisioned this project initially as a feature film and told John, I said, I think that there should be something, a feature made about the making of Jaws, and it wouldn't necessarily need to center on Spielberg. There's many documentaries about Spielberg and what he did on Jaws, and I think he did a great job. But what did the crew go through with? What did they have to endure? They worked sometimes. I mean, I know Cal Accord. Cal Accord was a special effects technician on Jaws who worked on the shark. And he said while it was the best summer of his life, he worked 15, 16 hours a day without a break for months. So there was no stopping that production from moving ahead. And when you hear some of the production stories of what was going on with some of those people and what was being the sabotage on the set that was occurring, the rivalry between Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw that everybody has heard about, some of the food fight that happened at the Harborview between the cast and crew just blowing off steam. It's just an incredible story. And the meeting of the cultures of Hollywood studio personnel and Martha's Vineyard locals, it never would have come together the way it did if both of those hadn't teamed up and found solutions. Excuse me.
Hmm.
Um, because the studio was in over their head, and they admit that they
Yeah.
moving to location on Martha's Vineyard and shooting on the actual ocean, while an inspired idea by Spielberg ultimately was the reason that film took so long and so much more money than was planned to actually accomplish finishing the film. And there were people who just they needed people like Lynn Murphy to figure out how to do towing of the shark, or what were they were, they spent 20 weeks at sea, 20 weeks on the open ocean
Mm.
shooting the last hour of that film. And that's long for any film to shoot, and that's just the last half of the film. So it's really an incredible testament. So I basically got into it, but starting to formulate the idea about this project, and I deemed it Making the Monster because I thought the title was really catchy in a couple ways. It's about making the monster shark. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
the monster is the shark. It's making the monster movie, the monster blockbuster film. Making the monster industry. The industry that was born out of Jaws is a monster to this day. It's a juggernaut of cinema, and the summer movie would never have become had Jaws not established it on the map. And it made the monster career for Steven Spielberg and a lot of other people that worked on it. So Making the Monster felt to me very emblematic of a lot of things that were created by Jaws that to this day exist, and we have to thank Jaws for creating, either whether it was a happy accident or whatever, but lightning in a bottle worked for us in that regard. Um, but getting to meet John and then Jim Beller and Peter and other people, Jim Beller introduced me to Joe Alves. And I know we have a photo of that, if it's possible to bring that up. Joe and I
Mm-hmm.
meeting up. We met in Providence in the summer of 2018. And Joe and I met at this event that he was flown out for at the Providence Biltmore Hotel. And Jim worked around the corner, has known Joe for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And I impressed upon Joe meeting him. Joe was the production designer on Jaws and the art director, and had basically created the shark and designed the orca and most of this material. Anything that you see style-wise in the film, Joe's job as the production designer, that was his responsibility. So meeting Joe was an incredible opportunity to talk about the project and say, this is what I have in mind. I'd like to do a project about the making of Jaws and not really focus as much on Spielberg, but focus more on the crew and what you and other people that you worked with went through. And
Mm-hmm.
Joe loved the idea. I think Joe realized that this was something that was really deserving for the crew to finally get their comeuppance, and that it's important to tell their story and how they really did a great deal of work. It was a collaboration, obviously, between everybody, including the director and the editor and all the people above and below the line. But that crew went through a lot of really challenging situations, and ultimately they determined how to get that film in the can.
Mm.
And so Joe and I talked to Joe. I said, I'd love to start interviewing you. I'd love to start getting on camera some research material for this. Can I come out to you in California and set up some interviews? And so Joe agreed, and I flew out and had a crew. And the crew, we basically shot a round of interviews with Joe, Andy Stone, who was the DGA trainee on the film. We'll get there eventually. I'll tell you when we land on it. Cal Accord, Carl Gottlieb, the screenwriter, we interviewed as well, and Kevin Pike, who was actually working on the vineyard at the time in a restaurant. And Joe Alves met him. He left his storyboards behind in the restaurant that Kevin was in. And next thing you know, Kevin's hired to work on as a painter and carpenter on Jaws. Kevin went on to create the DeLorean in Back to the Future. He basically launched his career in film from being in a restaurant on Martha's Vineyard, meeting Joe Alves, getting hired on Jaws, and then he left the vineyard. He had no plan to do that until he worked on Jaws. And went in and worked on a number of films and is he's still I think he's retired now, but he has a great body of work behind him. So there's just a lot of people whose stories are really incredible. The way Jaws created it was the beginning of something for them and for a lot of people, and so it began people's new lives and careers. So Making the Monster, ultimately, we are currently in pre-production development, and we do not have a release date currently. I know that some viewers have been asking about some feedback on that. We don't have a venue that we can announce in any way. We do have progress that we've been able to make behind the scenes, and we have some forward momentum. But unfortunately, COVID-19 has impacted everybody's productions of late.
Absolutely.
And we're all having to deal with improvising how we move forward. What's the next step? And how do we figure out where to go next? Because people want to be entertained, and more than ever, they're sitting at home if they're stuck because of this virus. They want new content. We constantly are seeking out new stories and want to be impressed by new ways to be told exciting tales. And I think Making the Monster will make an extremely exciting tale about a lot of stories that people have probably never heard about in the production of Jaws.
So the production itself, it's going to be a docudrama in sort of like a mini series form for a certain amount of episodes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the idea is that it's going to be, we're doing 6 episodes. And we're going to be, the episodes will basically begin on Martha's Vineyard as the crew of Universal Studios arrives on the vineyard and begins production on the film. And the problems begin right away. You'll know that this film is in trouble from the pilot episode on, and it's all the episodes drive towards another problem being solved, and how do we get past this hurdle, and how do we get past the next hurdle. That film had no shortage of hurdles. The beauty
Yeah.
is learning about the production of Jaws. Anybody was like, is it going to be dramatic enough? I can't fit all the drama in 6 hours of television, is what we've learned. There's more drama. We could go further and further, but we need to be realistic about what people would, how long they would be wanting to sit for a television show, and also a certain amount of efficiency of scale. So, we are, the series will definitely be something that is going to be very fast paced, and will go all the way through post production, and ultimately the success of Jaws in cinemas that changed the industry forever. And that's really the goal, is to make a very tight, forward moving, character based drama in which you get to identify with a lot of people you've never known were even a part of the making of Jaws. And it will feel like Joe Alves likes to describe it as the Breaking Bad of Jaws. That we've got. Every episode will take you to a place where you need to see the next episode, and what are we going to how are we going to deal with solving these problems. So it's very exciting, and there's a lot of people really looking forward to seeing these stories told that haven't been before, and I'm just honored to be a part of working with these people who are just Joe Alves in particular is one of my great heroes. He's such a great guy. And he went on from Jaws to do production design on Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I think is one of the most incredible films of the 70s. And what he and Steven Spielberg pulled off for that movie, when you learn about what went on for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, is also in itself an incredible feat. Joe did production design on Escape from New York, Free Jack with Mick Jagger, and many other films. So, and Joe goes all the way back to Walt Disney, and he was in the studio system for a long time, and he's still kicking today, and he's got plenty of energy, and is dying to get into this show, and he's going to be part of our project Return of the Orca, which is our next fledgling effort in moving this whole tribute efforts forward.
That's really cool. Let's talk about that Return of the Orca. How is that going to become a production as well?
Well, the Return to the Orca has actually been born again as a happy accident, as a release of what's been going on. So I acquired the boat, the Lydia, 2 years ago, anticipating that making the monster the series would require an orca. We need to have an orca in the show. So as a platform for the actors to work with, we will require that. We'll require some mechanical sharks. We're going to require the orca. We're going to require the garage sail, which is the barge that was used during the production. So why not start with the orca? And found a boat that was very, very similar to the make of what was called the Warlock. The Warlock is the boat that was purchased by Joe Alves and Universal to turn into the orca. So the nature of that project was, let's get this boat and let's get it to the vineyard and make it ready for the production when we need to. It was not a very expensive purchase. And it was ultimately determined to be, hey, we'll need it at some point, so let's just have it and be ready to work with it. Because of the virus, because of COVID-19, we saw basically a lot of things get slowed down, and our chances of seeing the series go into development and production, obviously delayed to some extent. So the idea struck me that, well, we've got this boat, and there are people who would love to see the orca in the water, because we lost the orca many years ago.
Yeah.
The original was left on the Universal backlot for the tourists to enjoy in the same little lake where you'd go in the blue tram cars by Bruce, who would jump out of the water right next to you and scare you. And the orca sat on that backlot lake. A lot of people consider the orca to be like the Millennium Falcon or the car from Bullitt. or any of these vehicles that are part of cinema history and television history. So the fact that the boat was lost is just kind of incredible to people. The Steven Spielberg has even said that in an interview he was very upset with the fact that it was left to
Yeah.
rot, and
Yeah.
then nobody informed anybody that it was going to be destroyed. He never found out until it was already taken
Yeah.
apart and thrown away.
Is that it there?
That's the model.
The
That's a
model of
model
it.
that,
Yeah.
Eric Hollander, who actually designed our graphics, making the Monsters logo and Return of the Orcas logo. Eric Hollander, great guy, and a person I've been working with for a couple of years now. He was the director on a documentary called The Shark is Still Working, the legacy and saga of Jaws, which is actually on the Blu-ray and now the newly released 4K UHD version that was just issued this summer for the 45th anniversary of the film. So, but Eric created that model. Eric's a huge fan. He loves these projects. Eric actually stood in the original Orca before it was destroyed on Universal Studios lot, and I never got a chance to, but Eric did. So he'll always have that over on me.
So is this the actual boat that you're talking about?
Well, no, that's the Lydia.
That's the Lydia.
That's the actual boat that we're going to be turning into the Orca 3. The original Orca that you saw in the film, sailing with Robert Shaw, Roy Scheider, and Richard Dreyfuss, is the Orca, or the Orca 1. The boat that was created, a fiberglass copy of that boat that was only made for sinking, and it didn't have an engine. It didn't have the ability to move forward in the water. All it could do was sink and raise, and they used these hydraulic systems and barrels with air to hydraulically and buoyantly move the boat up and down for that last sequence where Roy Scheider's character, Chief Brody, is the last standing survivor of the Orca, or at least that he thought he was. Matt Hooper down below on the surface in the scuba tanks, waiting until the coast was clear and the shark was gone. But Roy Scheider was on the Orca 2 for most of that final sequence. So we deemed this boat to become the Orca 3, the next actual Orca that will exist in the world, since the other two are long gone. And the Orca 3, we have a couple of ideas about how to use it, and we've already been discussing this in public. The Orca 3 will be an evolved version of the Orca. Instead of being a shark hunting and killing vessel as it's represented in the film, the Orca 3 will be a platform for research. We've made an agreement with Wendy Benchley and Beneath the Waves. She's a chairman on that. Austin Gallagher, who is the CEO of Beneath the Waves, has agreed that the Orca 3 will be a platform of research and understanding of local shark and marine ecology around Martha's Vineyard. This is something that maybe some people might be aware, but Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod, now has a huge great white shark population driven by both climate change and the prevalence of seals, who have been federally protected since 1974. So we now have an enormous population of seals, and thereby an enormous population of great white sharks. And unfortunately, we suffered our first casualty in 80 years off of Wellfleet off Cape Cod. This young gentleman was killed by a great white when he was boogie boarding in only, I think, maybe 50 feet from the beach. And it was the dusk, late in the day, time when sharks feed. And, that was an unfortunate event. But a lot of what happens with these types of incidents is that the education needs to be greater. And we need to respect there's not changing of this situation in any way. We can't hunt the seals. We can't find a way to lure the sharks away. The sharks are going to come in. And the only tool that we have at our defense is education. We need to be aware of what the situation is, and that we can still enjoy the ocean, but we need to do it in a way that is smart and informed and understanding of what this species does and how they behave, and where, when I go to Martha's Vineyard and swim off of South Beach now, I enjoy myself until I see a seal. I'm out of the water as soon as I see a seal.
Right.
It's just one of those things you learn. If there's a seal nearby, there's a high likelihood of a great white shark being nearby. So the boat will really be part of the platform for Beneath the Waves to help spread the word. And we think that because it's the boat from Jaws, that many people will want to hear the story, and hopefully that will help get the word even farther than simply just, we've got some information about sharks along the vineyard in Cape Cod that you may want to be aware of, but we want that to be part of it. Additionally, we're hoping to be able to give kids from Camp Jabberwocky on Martha's Vineyard, a camp for disabled kids, free rides on the Orca 3 during their summer stay on Martha's Vineyard, so they can enjoy a day on the water and it be of no cost to them whatsoever. We want to provide that service. Having grown up on the vineyard and been a childhood resident, I'm very connected to the island and the people there. And though I may not live there anymore, I feel a deep connection to wanting to be able to give back in many ways to a place to me that has always been one of my favorite places on earth. And yes, ultimately the Orca 3 will hopefully be available for just Jaws fans who want to come aboard and go out for a tour and, stand next to a yellow barrel up on the pulpit and imagine a great white shark chasing the boat, and stand atop the flying bridge and imagine their Quint and Richard Dreyfuss, arguing over what they were going to do next. All of the above. We want it to be enjoyed by fans of Jaws, to be a research vessel, to provide these kids, a great day on the water. And we'll see what the future holds. But I feel really great about what this boat can now become. As opposed to what how it was represented in the film,
Right.
because we've evolved, and Peter Benchley, who passed many years ago, Wendy Benchley's the widow of Peter, and he wrote Jaws. But in many ways, Jaws demonized sharks, and
Hmm.
while it succeeded in many ways, the film was a success, and he went on to do many other films. The stigma that it created did create a certain amount of regret in the Benchleys. And their feeling was, we need to find a way to sort of make up for this. People love Jaws and they love the scare and the story, but we need to make sure that people realize sharks are just doing what sharks do. They're not out to find people and kill them. They frankly don't like to eat people. It's just we tend to look in the water sometimes like their favorite food: seals, sea lions, other fish. We get silhouetted behind, between the sun and the shark, and we're just a shadowy figure that looks big enough and good enough to eat. And usually they attack and hit the leg or hit an arm or the rib cage and then move away. They're like, that's not what I typically was gonna eat. I don't like that. But unfortunately, that usually results in a fatal blow and a bite that people bleed out from. We are very much aligned with the Benchleys in our mission to make sure that people understand sharks are not the enemy. They're just another part of nature, and we need to respect what sharks are in their natural environment. And the fact that they are in a place now that they weren't 40 years ago, and in greater numbers. But let's just all be vigilant and let them be, and hopefully we can stay safe, they can stay safe, and there's a balance that the Orca 3 can be a part of restoring.
Which is amazing, which is really fantastic. And it's given you a deeper appreciation, I'm sure, for sharks and for, just nature in general, right? Through your work, through your body of work, not just of obviously being a part of Jaws and making the monster, but just through the scope of everything that you've done, which has a certain thread to it, it seems, David.
Yeah, it's kind of an accident, frankly. I think that the lineup of how things have happened and the themes that are being explored in what I've been going and trying to pursue over the last couple of years have all just sort of naturally occurred. And like the production of Jaws and I think the stories of people from back then, there is some providence and some happy accidents that sometimes life just offers you. And I think just listening to the hints about what's the way to go with this next, what do you do next, what is the right way to honor this material, and what feels like, don't force it to be something. Listen to what you think it's telling you to do and how to honor it and how to tell that story. And I think that there are fans of Jaws all over the world. Joe Alves tells me that when he goes all over to the Far East, to Europe, to South America, he's worked on all these other great films: Close Encounters, Escape from New York. It's a great, incredible career. Jaws is what all of those people want to talk about mostly, and how that film connects with people.
Yeah.
Not just because it's about sharks and it scared them, but their favorite characters, the ensemble acting of the last act between those three incredible actors who brought together, I think, one of the most memorable sets of ensemble acting that you'll find in cinema. And in many ways, it's a special film because of all the things they couldn't control, and many things that were just accidents, and just worked out the way they did. And even Spielberg says, had that shark been working the whole production, the film would not have been as good as it is.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't have come up with the solutions like the yellow barrels popping up and
Yeah.
letting you know the shark was there. Hiding the shark and only allowing them to have a couple of minutes of screen time was the most effective way to make that thriller work. And Joe Alves' storyboards, if you look at Joe's storyboards from the film, that shark is in a lot more of that movie, according to the storyboards, than ended up being in the final film. And I think that is a real testament to the fact that, less is more, and let the audience's imagination do the work for you, and don't oversell it. Let there be, some amount of letting the viewer create the terror and create the suspense. And to me, that's always been a mantra of working great creatively is give your audience credit. Let them bring part of the creativity into the process by viewing what you're showing. You don't have to force feed. You don't need to hit people over the head and really do a lot of heavy-handed work in telling your story. People are smart, and people also create in the white space of storytelling something more valuable and more potent than anything any one filmmaker can sort of push on the screen and try to make you feel.
Let the audience live it, let them experience it sort of in their own ways, which is really important. Well said, David. There's a couple of photos. Actually, there's a couple while you were chatting that we were able to dig up too of Joe that I think you'll enjoy as well as the audience. Here's one that really goes back. And let's see, we'll bring it out here. There we go. And if you lean to, I think it's your left or right, then they'll see you in the screen. There you are. So that's cool. Tell us about what we're seeing there. That's cool.
Yeah, so Joe was really responsible for a great deal of, making sure Bruce was looking the way he did. He worked with a special effects artist named Roy Arbogast, and Roy and him were constantly tending to that shark. The shark needed a lot of makeup and needed a lot of tending to and maintenance. Not just in terms of working and functioning to be, moving around in the water, but just to look right. I think Joe's probably just pushing a tooth up in there, so because they were falling out.
So he's a dentist too.
He's a dentist, yeah. So there was some orthodonty work. There was a little bit of skin blemishes. There was, some rouge put on Bruce once in a while. He needed constant attention. The Atlantic Ocean was not forgiving to that that mechanical shark.
No.
And there was 6 sharks total. So there was a variety of sharks. The one of the main sharks that Joe was working on here. But there were left to right, right to left sharks for particular shots. There was the toe shark where you saw it from above moving through the water with the Orca. And all the sharks needed work all the time. The crew was busy constantly just making it, keeping it, camera ready and able to work. So they had their work cut out for them. And,
did you come across any sharks while filming? Were there any circulating in the area while all this was going on?
Well, there've always been great whites around Martha's Vineyard, not necessarily in the number that there are today, but I don't recall any part of the production indicating that they had seen any. I do know people who were, sword fishermen and so forth off Martha's Vineyard, who have come across great whites and other sharks like makos and so forth. But no, the only real shark that was actually seen in Jaws is the tiger shark that they catch, the wrong shark, as they call it. The one that Matt Hooper measures with his tape measure and says the bite radius on this shark is different than the victim. So he concludes this is not the shark, it's a shark. And that was a tiger shark that was found in Florida and quickly shipped up by a FedEx on a plane, but on ice. But that sharks decompose very quickly, and that shark was stinking to high heaven by the time they got it on that dock in Edgartown to be able to start shooting. And so when you see the flies on the tiger shark in the movie, there's a couple shots where you'll see the flies. It's because the shark smells horrible. And the actors, everybody, there was extras and actors and they had to do their best not to look like they were about to lose their lunch, because that shark was not very smelling very good at that point. And they needed to get rid of it fast once they wrapped that scene.
Here's a couple more shots here. We'll take a look at. Here's another one of Joe, of course, a really nice, more current one of him there.
Yeah, Joe's probably given a talk about Jaws and Close Encounters or what have you. But Joe loves to get out there. He still gives talks to fans, and recently was recognized with a Lifetime Achievement Award. And it's well deserved. He had quite a bit of accomplishments in his career, and is retired now and enjoying retirement.
It must be an honor working alongside him as well for you, David, and for everybody, huh?
Joe, I mean, the thing about Joe is incredible is he's really sweet. He doesn't put on airs about anything that he does. He works hard. He still to this day creates artwork in his home and just loves to stay busy and create things. And I think that at Joe, at his defining, core is basically a guy who likes to make pretty and beautiful things that, he feels connected to. And I think a lot of people feel that way. Joe, is very generous with his time. Joe is very open and loves to share stories about what he went through. He's constantly online on podcasts or talk shows. And Joe, I think, feels a certain amount of, wanting to give people inspiration, that creation is something that a lot of people would find a great deal of contentment in. It's not riches, it's not necessarily fame and glory. It's the ability to create and to make things that you feel proud of and connected to, and that people appreciate. And art is, whatever kind of art that you can make. I think Joe sort of, he gets that that's something that people have a point of pride in the world, and it will live on beyond them. And that's, I think, something that we can all hope to look forward to, is having something that we can say we created something gorgeous, and when we're long gone, that will be somebody else will appreciate it later as well.
Absolutely. Here's another photo here. And I believe this is a young David.
Yes.
A couple of the viewers, there's been a lot of comments coming in as well. Really cool stuff. And they said, what a cute kid.
Thanks. Yeah, with my bowl haircut.
Yeah, I had that. The bangs.
Yeah, the bangs.
We had the bangs well before Justin Bieber did.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is a pretty typical haircut for 1974. That was. I'm standing in my yard. We're just moving into. My dad bought a barn, a horse barn that we converted into our house in Oak Bluffs, Mass. And so here we are getting ready to move into it. The loft upstairs was where the hay used to be kept, and it was a ladder up there. Every night I needed to come down and use the bathroom. I was going down, rungs of a ladder, not stairs. I had a really special childhood on the vineyard. I loved it. I thought it was great, and there was a great freedom. I was given a quarter tucked into my shorts and said, if you have a problem, give us a call from a payphone. And but go off and enjoy the island, just be home by dark. And again, a foreign concept to parents today.
Yeah. Absolutely.
One of the things we would do on the vineyard is me and other kids, we would go to the ferry dock in Oak Bluffs, and all the people would be coming off the ferry walking up, and we would be in the water with our masks and snorkels and fins, just shouting up to the tourists saying, how about a coin?
Right.
Want to throw quarters in the water and go and dive down to get the quarters. For the Northeast, I think Martha's Vineyard was probably one of the most Caribbean-like experiences or island-like experiences you could have in this area. Mm-hmm. And people will always cherish, the 70s were a special time on the island. It's still beautiful, but it's not like it was back then.
Mm. Are you sure that you and I were not cousins by any way, stretch of the imagination? Same haircut.
Yep, maybe.
I think we might have been cousins.
Yep, maybe. Yeah,
Same,
I probably had that shirt.
Yeah. Well, when we would come up from Long Island and visit all of our relatives in Connecticut, Massachusetts, I remember they used to do where when I would grow out of clothes, then it would go to another cousin who was sort of getting into that size.
Right.
And there were some cousins in Massachusetts, so I wonder, you might have had the shirt.
Could be. Did you ever own Oshkosh Bagosh overalls?
No, I didn't have that. No, I didn't have that.
Or corduroy jeans.
Corduroys. Oh, corduroys. Yes. Yeah. Lots of corduroys. Absolutely. So a couple more shots here too. Tell us about this one, David.
So that's Joe Alves with Greg Nicotero. Greg Greg's a huge Jaws fan on Martha's Vineyard, or a Jaws fan. Greg, of course, prolific career. Greg works on the Walking Dead on AMC networks.
Mm.
But Greg has been a co-owner of KNB Effects in LA for many years, and provided a lot of practical effects for many films and television shows. Uh, Greg has one of the deepest libraries of Jaws stills and video. Of he is just a huge fan of it. He came to Martha's Vineyard with Joe in 2005 for the first Jaws Fest, which
Mm.
was the first organized Jaws convention, really, on the island, which they invited all the cast and crew who wanted to come and have panel discussions. And Greg was there with Joe, and even created a section of the Orca, the rear section of the Orca, with wax figures created by Nick Mara of Shaw, Scheider, and Dreyfus. So this shark is actually the last remaining shark from the original mold that was used to create Bruce.
Mm.
And Greg was hired by the Academy Museum in Burbank, California, to restore this, what was called Junkyard Jaws. This was a shark that was originally used at Universal Studios in Orlando's theme park.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was when the ride closed there, this shark somehow made its way all the way to somewhere in Sun Valley, California, to be atop a junkyard as a mascot with a sign on it to advertise the junkyard's business. And somehow people started recognizing this shark and saying, "Is that from Jaws? It looks like one of those sharks." So Greg has this was during the phase where he was taking this shark to KNB Effects and then getting ready to basically restore it and get it ready to go in this museum. And that work has been accomplished. This was at the beginning of the process, and now that shark is beautiful and polished and looking as brand new as it can. And it's going to be in the Academy Museum in Burbank as one of the centerpieces for that exhibit.
Wow, that's amazing. That's fantastic. How about this shot here you sent along?
Well, that's Lee Fiero. So that's the woman. Lee was the drama teacher in my class who, basically got me to come down to the beach that day and be in the movie. And this was her pivotal moment when she slaps Roy Scheider. And I consider Lee was classically trained in New York in theater, and was probably a really rare find on the Vineyard for somebody who had so much experience as an actor. And really brought it home. She, I think, is the soul of the film with relationship to Roy Scheider's character, Chief Brody. Um, Scheider's character is, of course, afraid of the water. He's a new person to the island. He feels like an outsider. And in many ways, he felt pressured by the mayor and the town fathers to basically sweep this first attack under the rug. And Lee's character, whose son is killed after the first victim, in which, Chief Brody basically ignores his gut and just goes with what the town tells him to do, to chalk it up as an accident, but he still knows it's a shark problem. He's just trying to make sure he doesn't make waves in his community, so to speak. But she comes up to him, smacks him, which reportedly was many takes were done of that to get it right. And it's a real smack. I mean, Roy Scheider was a boxer and said, "Go ahead and wallop me. Don't worry. I'll take it. It's okay." So she really hit him hard for all of those takes. But yeah, Lee's work on that film, that moment is the pivotal moment where Scheider's character, Chief Brody, has to face the music and keep his integrity. And I think a lot of viewers probably will agree that this is the moment in the film where it's really it changes from an adventure yarn and a thriller into a serious drama, and becomes one that you realize, okay, there are stakes here. His soul is on the line, and he needs to find a way to make sure that he can live with himself after this experience, because Mrs. Kintner is not going to let him forget that moment ever.
Right, exactly. Here's another shot that you shared, and let's see. Now, tell us about this. This was kind of cool here, the location guide and getting involved with Google and all.
Yeah, the what happened was during the virus's main appearance here in the spring of this year, I discussed with Jim Beller and John Campopiano, the two friends I told you about, the collectors, who I've become really good friends with, that there's a lot of production resources out there, and there are some people who have put photos from all the different locations that you can find on Martha's Vineyard together. But there's no one resource, comprehensive guide that if you wanted to pick up and sort of say, where can I find every place related to the making of Jaws? I decided we would use the tool Google Earth, a platform available to anyone really, but it gives you the ability to populate a project with content. So we went through the process of painstakingly find every possible location related to the making of Jaws, as well as Jaws 2 and Jaws the Revenge, that were shot on the vineyard, in part at least. And get those into one comprehensive guide. And we released that this past April, and it has gone around the planet as one of the favorite fan attractions to use if you want to know where everything from Jaws was shot. You can call it up on your phone. It's available in Google Chrome or Google Earth Pro on your phone. And you can just surf around. If it's possible to play the video, we can actually show the folks what that looks like. There's it has almost, I think it actually now has 80 or just over 80 locations related to the film.
Right.
And that is and in an interactive format, as opposed to pulling out a book and going through photography and so forth, or pulling up a web page. So the interactive element of the Ultimate Jaws location guide, I think, is what makes it really unique. And it's live and it's free. If you want to go to Martha's Vineyard and enjoy the sites of Martha's Vineyard, and you want to go see the locations, the Jaws location guide will show you where you are in relationship to these places. And Jim Beller provided a lot of great photography that has never been seen before related to the production of the film. So you can use the guide. There's some photos in there that are related to each location, and some of those are brand new to the world that have never been seen by anybody before since the guide has been appearing. So please, if you just Google Ultimate Jaws location guide, you'll get right to the homepage, and you can surf it for free. Just recommend that you use for a web browser. Google Chrome is a better browser to use. And on your phone, you want to use, just Google Earth, the application. It's available on Android and on iOS.
So are there any videos, anything that people can look at, maybe on YouTube or anywhere, or websites? Where can they go to learn more about all of this?
Well, we do have a social media presence for Making the Monster right now. So if you do just search for Making the Monster on Facebook, there is a group for us on there. And we are, most of that same content you'll find on Instagram. If you look on Instagram, it's instagram.com/makingthemonster, all one word. We've been, getting a slow but steady following of Jaws fans and people who are becoming more aware of the project. The link to the Jaws location guide is right there in the bio of our Instagram account. And you can see over the past, 2 or so years that we've been, engaged in the project, both stories, photos, videos, some of the interviews that we've conducted with Joe and other people from the crew, and get a special look into it. Our focus is really about the crew and the production of Jaws. There's other sites like the Daily Jaws. That's a great online resource. That is a daily resource for people who want to know more about all aspects of the film, the fandom, scenes from the film, new things that have appeared around the world that show how Jaws has impacted the fans today. And they do a great job, and there are other sites like that. Making the Monster is really specific to, let's talk about what the crew of that film went through, and the legacy of the incredible effort that they made, and enjoy this guide. I totally encourage everybody that's watching this to take a look at the Jaws location guide, enjoy it, surf around. We even have locations from Los Angeles. The pool where the head that came out of the boat is in the location guide, so you can see exactly the pool on Google Earth 3D. That pool that was used in that, as well as the lakes that some of the shots were, and Catalina Island, where a lot of the underwater photography was taken. So
it's amazing.
It's really, we're very proud of it, and we're very happy that people are enjoying it. And it really has I don't think there's any, not trying to toot our own horn so much, but we put a lot of work into making sure that every possible aspect of the making of those films that we include, except for Jaws 3, which was mostly shot in Florida, in SeaWorld, which Joe Alves actually directed. It's his only directing credit. We wanted this guide to be as full featured as it possibly can be. And so, and it's free for the world. We just want everybody to enjoy it.
It's so cool when you think about the way these films are made, and even just television shows. We've all been on, you and I, we've all been on a lot of different sets where it's just, in our different roles. I tend to be the host or on-air person, but I was on the lot at Paramount last fall, and one of my friends there, he works on the Dr. Oz show. He's one of the audience coordinators for Dr. Oz and a lot of other shows. And he took me to this massive parking lot, and it almost looked like it was like a drive-in movie theater. So I said, wow, that's cool. I like the way that huge wall looks, where you've got blue, and then you've got shades of blue, and then sort of white, and then it looks like the sky. And he says, well, you see where we are? You see where this parking lot sort of dips down, Jim, and all of the employees here, the Paramount lots park their cars here. Well, when they're filming a movie and they need an ocean scene, all the employees back their cars out of this lot. They fill this big crevice where the cars usually park with water, and that backdrop all of a sudden becomes some of the great movies of all time, the backdrop for that. And it's just a regular parking lot that they use, but it becomes, it's blue on the bottom, and it's all ready to go whenever they need an ocean scene. And it's just really cool, the uses of things like that and how they're able to actually, come up with things like that. Huh? I'm sure you've been amazed over the years yourself, David.
Well, it's interestingly, the thing that most impressed me learning about Joe Alves' work was on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There's that road that basically Roy Neary's character almost hits the little boy on.
Yeah.
And when they first see the alien spacecraft fly by them when he gets the sunburn, that was a set. They built that in a hangar in Mobile, Alabama. So that wasn't a stretch of road that they found and they decided, let's lock this off for a couple of days and, like make people take alternate routes of travel around. They built that as a set. They built the rocks, they put the trees in there, they built a brand new road, painted the lines. So it was really, to see that some of these things they would rather create, because now I learned in filmmaking the practicality of, it's better to have the control of lighting it the way you want, having it for 16 hours a day if it takes that long to get the shots, not thinking about the sound pollution of being in an actual location. A lot of directors sort of want things on sets, and to be able to do that and have that control so that you don't waste time, you're not waiting, and you don't have things impacting the filming that you weren't planning on, planes flying overhead and so forth. But they shot in Mobile, Alabama. They shot in these huge blimp hangars. The entire end sequence, that landing pad area that the aliens and humans come together at, was an enormous set inside that blimp hangar. And they created paper mache rocks and everything to make it look like it was at the base of Devil's Tower. And even there was a cliff wall when Roy Neary's character is climbing up to be, to catch to Jillian, and he keeps sliding down while the helicopters from the government are about to gas them both. They just built, that was one scene that took maybe a minute and a half. Joe Alves and his art team built that. They built that sliding rock wall face. That's what you did back then. It wasn't CGI. It was, although the Close Encounters, apparently, they did do a lot of special effects for that work, which were mostly practical. Douglas Trumbull was a great special effects pioneer. He really was in charge of getting those spaceships and everything to look the way they did, which were absolutely gorgeous. And I like to think Close Encounters and Star Wars, while coming out in the same year, had a different aesthetic, and both were extremely pleasing to watch for different reasons. But old school Hollywood that Joe was a part of was, you build the sets, even if it shows up for a minute or less in screen time, you build it and you make it look the way you want, and you are able to shoot on it as many times as you need. And then at the end of it, you take it apart and you're done with it. But that's how they worked. And I've learned a lot of lessons about filmmaking through approaches that Joe and others have taken on, which is make it the way you need it to be, and use it. And then, but that way you don't have to make excuses about how it was hard to get it. And directors to this day, David Fincher, the house in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, that house that Daniel Craig's character stays in, that's not a real house. That was a set built with blue screen and green screen outside the windows, and they just composited in the snowy outdrop of Norway behind them. So That way they could shoot there as long as they wanted to, any hour of the day or night that they wanted to, and get everything they needed to in the can. And it didn't have to be light out or day or night or whatever. They just they used visual effects to make whatever they wanted outside those windows appear the way they did.
Tell us about, for those watching who, obviously are fans of movies and television shows and the whole thing, the differences, the nuances that you have picked up upon in producing for television and producing for film.
Well, television's grown as a medium, I think, and that's why I'm really excited about the potential for making The Monster to be a television project. I think that TV and film had really very different styles and approaches to storytelling for a long time. You went to the movies to see a movie, and you stayed home and watched television shows. And television shows, they were great, but they worked in very different ways. And if you grow up with things like All in the Family or MASH or the A-Team or Chips or any of these like classic television programs, the Brady Bunch, Gilligan's Island,
Dick Van Dyke,
Carol Burnett, Laugh-In, they all had they had different sensibilities applied to the way that you were entertained by them. And it's really been television, particularly through cable, grew into a medium that now that we're going to get more sophisticated. And now we have shows like Game of Thrones, which are on average between $40 and $60 million of production an episode. And I think that shows like Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad or there's all these series, Ozark on Netflix, they're doing real contemporary adult drama that's on a level of cinema to me. And I think that television has come into its own in a way, because we used to have just television was the square and cinema was the widescreen. And in a lot of ways that sort of, mentally cued you into a bit of a different viewing experience. Now they're both very similar. We have high definition televisions and now 4K televisions. They're broadcasting in progressive, 24 frames per second like cinema. And they are making stories, that are real and terrifying and just as incredible as films. And I think particularly, lucky for us, now that we're looking at, who knows when movies are going to come back. Right now, drive-in theaters are coming back because in the age of COVID-19, the only safe place to go watch a movie away from home is at the drive-in.
Yeah. Isn't that cool too?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I've been to drive-in movies. I remember going to see, they would always have double features. They had, I saw Cat People and Valley Girl back in the 80s as a double. I don't know why they put those two films together.
Yeah. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Or the Jason films, Friday the 13th, they would do that. Actually, this summer, Jaws and Jurassic Park had a head-to-head competition, and were the two biggest films, grossing films of the summer, because they put them out in drive-in theaters as double headers. And Jurassic won. And I don't begrudge anybody for liking Jurassic over Jaws. Everybody has their own taste, but it was really wonderful to see that people are appreciating the drive-in theater again. But the point being is that, television is now an experience that people can enjoy that has the level of production quality and storytelling quality that cinema has often enjoyed for a long time. And I think it's great because, we all want to have stories that really transport us and entertain us and thrill us and move us. And now with what's been happening in our world, it might be the place that's safest to be able to enjoy this media. And we may have to wait quite a while to get back into the movie houses and enjoy going out to the movies. And I hope that we do, because I think the communal experience, Jim, you might remember in the 80s, going to movies and seeing Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi or Raiders of the Lost Ark, audiences would applaud in the middle of the movie.
Yes.
There would be scenes that we got so riled up about that we enjoy just clapping and laughing together.
Even when people saw Titanic, I mean, just the visual nature of the size of the screen, and it just makes it a totally different feel when you're watching something like that.
And I do miss that kind of an experience. And once in a while it does happen. There are films that are good, but to me, cinema had a communal quality to it. That was really enjoyed for a long time of being, we all loved it. We were all transported. And I think the 80s and maybe even the early 90s was a period of real, like, just fun enjoyment of cinema together.
Do you
And
remember Sense-Around, when it was the movie was going to be in Sense-Around, and all of a
that
sudden,
was Battlestar Galactica. I
yeah,
think they had the cinema version of that.
an earthquake,
And Earthquake. Yeah.
Charlton
Um,
Heston.
Charlton Heston. Yeah, they did a number of things there. And it's funny, there was even a cinema that for a while they did this movie called The Shocker. And in the cinema, people can look it up online. It's a really funny story about some things that cinemas, one particular theater did. But the theater created this movie was called The Shocker, and it was this little creature that like came out after people and attacked their faces. It looked kind of like an amoeba or something. But installed in every seat in the theater was a arm with a shocker bug that would just shoot up from between your legs or over your head. I forget which way it was. But at a particular moment in the film, everybody's seat would trigger the appearance of their shocker,
Wow.
and it would just drop in front of their face, and people would scream and throw their popcorn out and toss the drink on the person they were there with. It was a real hoot. And even John Waters had a movie called Hairspray, in which they put out scratch and sniff cards with the movie, so that you'd see a number come up in the corner of the screen, and it cued you with the free scratch and sniff card you picked up in the lobby.
Right.
Okay, smell this one now. It goes with the buttered popcorn, or it goes with the cigar, or whatever.
And sometimes they've had where seats like would move up and down for certain movies, like a Roller Coaster. I think when that came out, where the roller coaster suddenly went off the track or whatever, it was like we were on it or something. Really.
Yeah. And IMAX movies now, if you go to an IMAX theater, they have each seat has a subwoofer in it, so you can enjoy the feeling of sound going right through your body. And I love IMAX theaters and that experience. And cinema's grown up. We now can reserve a seat and go and sit where we want, not have to be rushed to like get a good seat when we want to. We can even have our dinner brought right to our seats, and we can enjoy it there. But again, this is on hold for now, and hopefully we'll have it back in not too far of a distant future. But I think people are going to rely on Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and HBO and so forth, and Disney. They're all getting into the fact that at-home entertainment needs to be something that we can all get and enjoy classic films as well as brand new entertainment.
Do you think the drive-ins will make more of a resurgence, or is this just a short-lived nostalgic wave we're in right now?
I think it's a possibility. I think that we're probably getting people to go to drive-ins who have never been to them before.
It's a new experience for them, right?
Yeah, a lot of younger people who never had the chance to get to a drive-in who are going now. And the experience of a drive-in, Jim, you might remember when we were younger, you basically took a box off of a pole.
Yeah, speaker.
Hardwired, and you hung it up inside the driver's side of your car.
And some people would take off and forget that the speaker is still attached to the wire.
Yeah. So now it's, if you've got a decent stereo system, you're receiving the signal in full surround stereo if you've got a nice setup in your car.
Yeah.
And the sound system in many ways is as good as you can bring to the drive-in. So I think that there's a newfound appreciation for technically what you can get out of a drive-in theater, and more people are seeing it and experiencing it than they have before. Well, I guess time will tell whether or not that remains to be something that is now a new business rekindled for Americans to enjoy. I'd love to see it come back. I think, drive-ins did have a downturn over time, and now they're getting a shot. And it will be interesting to see in the next couple of years, even with whatever happens with the virus, maybe we will have a love affair with drive-in theaters all over again in this country, or maybe the world. Maybe
the world. It's funny that you mentioned the drive-in theaters, because the last couple of nights, I don't know what triggered it. Maybe the passing of Carl Reiner, the legend, of course, comedy legend. We've been watching a lot of the Dick Van Dyke Show reruns as nostalgic shows, but we've also been watching on YouTube, because we went to drive-in theaters as kids, growing up in New York on Long Island. The commercials, not the commercials, the little ads that would run in between, enticing you to go to the refreshment center.
Right.
And all of the animation for back then, and all of the creativity and persuasiveness that went into those cool ads for the hot dogs and the popcorn and the ice cream and everything. And it's just really nostalgic. It's all, you can see a lot of it on YouTube, and there it is. And they have a lot of views. People want nostalgia.
Yeah, I think nostalgia is a real comfort food for us emotionally. We love to look back at a simpler time, and the aesthetic that was used back in those periods, hand-drawn cell animation, a certain scratchiness and imperfection. I love, it's like there's all these classic, it's like the cop character that hates CDs, but he loves vinyl,
Right,
CDs
right.
sound better. There's a richness to analog that digital, digital looks beautiful. And in some ways a digital playback will just be as gorgeous and sound as great time after time after time. There's no changing those ones and zeros. But there's something to be said for how analog technology, created a certain amount of patina, as they call it, a little bit of like,
Yeah.
physical emulsion change that we are just happens through age or happens through the medium itself. And so I love to see that. I think that it's a great reflection of what we've had. And there's a lot of younger people I know that actually love to look at that because they didn't grow up with it, and they see it and they see, wow, that's got a texture to it that's really incredible. I like it. It's interesting, and it's not deliberate. It's just a result of using that medium. And
Same thing with
so,
music too. Yeah, they're
and with music,
rediscovering a lot of music now.
and distortion things, distortion that was before like a technical no-no, that people like Hendrix employed, and now
Yeah.
distortion is one of those things that you can't listen to some rock without it. It's part of the character of that music.
Cassette
um,
tapes are actually coming back in certain areas.
I didn't know
I
that. That's interesting.
I have tons of those.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see sort of, I think embracing the traditional, media and stories and all this stuff, and bringing it into the fold. For example, movies used to have intermissions,
Yes.
and I saw Lawrence of Arabia in the early '90s in 70 millimeter here in Boston, and it was on a huge screen in a theater that, they don't make cinemas with 800 seats anymore like they did back then. But to see Lawrence of Arabia in 70 millimeter, and then to enjoy the intermission, and you go out for
Mm.
15 minutes and
Hmm.
you take a break and stretch your legs and talk to people and say, oh my God, those shots of the desert and Omar Sharif. I mean, in drive-ins, that would be a really cool and thing to do, because now you hopefully you could be a little bit more social and talk about what you've seen and enjoy a refreshment, and then and get back in your seats to watch the rest of the film. So
Hmm.
yeah, I love, the having grown up in the '70s. There's no way you can't love some of this sort of nostalgia stuff. It's just it's a period that always inspires you to look back and be kind of fond of the way it was, and appreciate what we had, and think about bringing that into the present in some way, that people can appreciate it now who didn't live with that.
So have you adapted like all of us, working in television and radio? And I've been working this, like you mentioned, not able to do certain things. There's several TV shoots that I, was supposed to be on that have sort of been grounded with the plane situation in Florida, Texas, Ireland. So working out of the home studio a lot too, hosting radio shows and other things. You doing a lot of home studio adaptation, sort of using the home as the home base for now, editing and other things?
Not really. Interestingly, so in Boston, at least, the governor of Massachusetts deemed media essential, and so that our
Wow.
job was to keep going even when others were told to stay home. And as a colorist and an online editor, I'm really responsible for seeing things on the exact screen that is meant to be seen. This material, because it's not something that you can do remotely and really have accurate colors and brightness values represented
Right.
through the screen. So,
Right.
but I've been going in with maybe under a dozen other people into WGBH's Outpost Studios, and working on material. But we do Zoom, Zoom teleconferencing. So the clients who are watching this, we're sending it to them remotely to watch. We're doing virtual screenings where they watch with us in real time, and we get notes and make changes based on the notes from the producers and the director. And we've had to adapt. We've had to adapt to, like most people have had to, find a way to get the job done with people who are all located in different areas of the country or even the world. And
Hmm.
meanwhile, WGBH and Nova and Frontline have been sending people all over the planet, Wuhan, China, and the South America and parts of Europe, Italy, for example, in telling the stories of what this virus has done to this planet, and getting the stories out to people who need to hear it. At the same time, putting the lives of those creatives and producers and camera people and audio engineers at risk. So it's been a very interesting, scary, and at the same time revealing process of seeing how we can actually get a lot of this work done, while not necessarily being in the same room together. And it's gone a lot better than some might have anticipated. And we can do this. And in some ways it's sad because the social aspect of interacting has been reduced, but it's a necessary part of the way we function now. And I think anybody watching this podcast right now has had to make compromises and accept to make changes and adjust. And I feel like in the end, we'll all have learned a better lesson about appreciating that we have greater connections to each other, and we don't always have to be in the same place. And we won't take everything for granted that we sometimes maybe did in the past. And there will be a better day someday ahead, but maybe we'll be, much more appreciative of what we have as a culture, and be able to sort of take that with us into the future long after this virus is finished doing what it's doing to us.
I agree 100%. I've been saying that. I don't think we're going to return to any sort of a normal. Hopefully we return, or not return, but we enter into better, some more kindness and empathy, less divisiveness, maybe a more deeper understanding of why we're here, appreciation of the environment, nature. You see, even I mean, we're always out in nature, living right here along the coast. We're always near the water, by the water. I'm somebody, actually, I've said it oftentimes on television, radio, and even on this show, you got to drag me. Maybe Jaws would be the thing that would do it, but you have to drag me out of the ocean. I have such a respect growing up on a coast near the ocean as well. Such a respect and such, it's hard to put it in words, but there's a relationship that I have with the ocean where it's my go-to place. It's my solace. Swim it, surf it, boogie board it, walk it, play in it, whatever. Since I was a child, still do. It still draws me all the time. Sun setting, sun rising in it. It's just an incredible thing. But I also have an understanding and respect for the ocean. The ocean, if it wanted to, and one wave or riptide could wipe me out in seconds. Something that's in the ocean could come get me in seconds. So there's this understanding, this unusual respect I have for the ocean, that allows me to just really enjoy it even more. I realize that it's one of those things in life that's bigger than me, but how incredible and beautiful and life-giving it actually is. And that's one of the things I've said too, to comfort people, because I'm all about inspiration and positivity. The sun will come up and go down at each day. The birds will chirp, the ocean tides will come in and out. So look for some of those constants in life through all of this chaos and this uncharted water, so to speak, that we're dealing with, and look for some of those constants. Go to the ocean and let the ocean salt air and all of that just sweep over you, and watch the sun set in it. And all of a sudden, it doesn't erase the stuff that's going on. It just softens it. It just reminds you that there's things bigger, like nature and other things, that provide a sense of solace and comfort and joy that will be here no matter what goes on, in our daily human lives, right?
Absolutely. And I think that, keeping your feet grounded on the earth and appreciating what you have that costs nothing is the most important value in life, is just remembering that, you are a person in a planet where, whether you have money, you don't have money, there's always something beautiful that you can be a part of and be next to. Obviously having grown up on Martha's Vineyard and still going there to this day, I enjoy a special amount of connection to the ocean in a place like that. I'm about an hour and 15-minute drive to Woods Hole from where I live now. And the moment I step foot on that ferry and it sets out into the water, the 45-minute ferry ride from Woods Hole to Oak Bluffs or Vineyard Haven where it docks, that is my whole, everything in me expands and relaxes. The moment the sea air gets into my lungs and I smell the smells I've grown up with. And I think anybody, we all kind of attach to those things, somatically being in the body. And this is something, appreciating the world for what it is, and not, and thinking, we all get caught up in our careers. We get caught up in a great deal of things. We live our lives online more and more all these days, but it's so important to sort of remain grounded in the natural world and appreciate it, and understand that you do have, it's bigger and stronger than all of us, and appreciate, respect that, and admire the beauty and the mystery of it, because it's always going to wow you. There will never be answers to understanding it all, but I think there will be an appreciation for it and a beauty that you'll take into your grave.
Absolutely. And with the work that you do and have done in television and film, and continue to do, David, the extraordinary body of work that's impacted all of us in so many different ways. It brings you great blessing and joy every day when you get up and you get there and you start creating, because being creative and being communal sort of weave together beautifully as communicators like we are. And if we can use our creative assets, tools, talents, visions, whatever it may be, to create things that touch people's lives in instant gratification ways, but really more deeply and long lasting ways, that's really the icing on the cake of all this work we do in this very ever-changing, fast-paced, crazy, chaotic world of media and broadcasting and film and television entertainment, all the things we're in, right?
Yeah, I think I was inspired by creators. When I started watching films and television shows and so forth, I was inspired by the fact that the skills and the talents of people were finding a way to talk to me differently than just having a conversation. And I think that the skill to communicate well and to seduce into storytelling and do things to you that are, find a way that connect to you emotionally, not just informationally, but emotionally, and show how much we all have in common, I think is the ultimate goal of storytelling. It's to show a relationship that we all universally have, connections to some of the same values, whether it's love for our children or our families or our friends, our connection and relationship with nature, and our quest to improve ourselves and to find more answers to what it is we're doing on this planet. I think that that's ultimately, these are stories that when you're not in the same room as somebody, but you can share these events and these stories, that's what sort of creates bonds between you. And it's, some people consider entertainment to be distractions, and I consider entertainments to be connections. And that whether it's music or film or sculpture or portraiture, there's all sorts of ways that we find connection between something somebody made and something that we're taking in by witnessing it and viewing it and feeling what it does to us. And so I think that's what, to me, creativity is really great for, and any medium can do that. It's a great place to be, and it's hard to find the one that works for you. A lot of people go through a lot of trial and error of figuring out what is it they want to do. I mean, there are people who, my dad was a general contractor and electrician. For him, the artifice of building a rock wall or creating, just getting the electrical in somebody's home so it's safe and it's not hurting anybody. I mean, that was his connection to people. They appreciated that.
Now, did you ever take him on scene for This Old House?
No, didn't bring on for This Old House.
You didn't meet Norm Thomas, huh?
No,
Norm Abrams.
he's retired now, happily
Yeah.
retired.
Norm Abrams, Bob Vila, yeah.
Yeah, but and he knows he's forgotten more than I'll ever know about that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's like I said, I think everybody has a way of expressing their skill and their art in the world to connect with other people, and I think that's a tangible thing that you can always value as being something that's worthwhile to do and explore and share.
So when you look at it, I mean, I know you've received all kinds of honors and accolades over the years, which is extraordinary. What are some of the things that continue to bring you the greatest blessing and joy as you do this work? You've described some of it so beautifully just now. Are there other inspirations that continue to drive you forward to want to create and be so immersed in really telling the stories of the human condition?
I think that that finding new stories to tell about things that people thought they already knew a lot about, making the monsters an example of something where I think people have the tip of the iceberg understanding of what occurred, and also a tip of the iceberg knowledge of the people who were involved, because of a lot of the stories that were told, the documentaries that were made about the making of Jaws are they center on a couple of people who were available and kind of made that very efficiently told. That's why a docudrama series, I think, will explore much deeper and richer characters than just what these, feature-length documentaries do the job to tell. And I think that I love to see history revisited in some ways and further understood. Apollo 13 is a great example of a docudrama
Yeah.
project that took you inside of, an event that most people probably witnessed through the news and maybe through, Jim's book and so forth. But the film really created a little bit more of a, and we all understand there's some creative license that goes into these projects, and so some of it's not a verbatim transcript of what actually occurred, but the events usually, hopefully, they stick to as close to basically what happened. And learning about, these people are, they are extraordinary in the fact that they were part of history and these incredible events, but they're also just human beings who have the
Right.
same fears and hopes and connections. And when you're an astronaut at NASA, and you're in the middle of a crisis like what happened to those guys, you just want to get home to your kids. And we all relate to that. We all just want to get home to our kids. We want to be with our families again. And I think that that's the great, equalizer in life is, nothing is more important than our connection to each other and learning stories about people who we may think just their fame and their careers and what they're known for in the public is, that's all they need. But really, that's just kind of the way that they earn a living and they enjoy their success and be able to continue on. But at the end of the day, you need to have loved ones and you need to connect to your world through people and your relationships. And so I think that it's just really, we're all human and we're all very similar. We're all very
Hmm.
similar in many ways, no matter where we are in life. These are universal truths.
Absolutely. Do you get a chance? Are you lucky enough in the course of your day to work with young minds and in terms of mentoring those who are sort of coming up the ranks who want to do this kind of work? Do you get to have some interaction with them? Maybe sort of guide them a little bit if they want to get into television, they want to get into filmmaking, things of that nature.
Yeah, at WGBH, I work with a lot of really great, hardworking people and assistant editors or other people, producers who are younger and starting out in the business. And now that I've had some time to really figure out what it is that I've been able to do well and areas that I've been able to learn I need improvement in and so forth. Giving younger people the ideas that there's you're never perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. The important thing is to take those mistakes and learn from them and learn how to get better at them and develop techniques that improve your work, but also to enjoy it. You're part of something really incredible. The media industry in this country is, it's not like coal miners or electric workers or, craftspeople in carpentry or, I mean, there's, it's not an enormous pool. I mean, I know a lot of people would love to work in it, but for the ones who are actually working in it and that's their staff gig or they're making money as freelancers or have their own production companies, um, it's a privilege and it's a really wonderful thing to do. And no 2 days are exactly the same in this kind of a life and this career. So I enjoy the fact knowing that, projects are always going to be different. I'm learning new things all the times on the projects I work on. Um, whether it's about Pan Am or about Jaws or about COVID-19 and what happened in Wuhan, China or Italy. There's something to be gained from all of them. And, people really can enjoy the fact that they are getting a peek into history and then learning from that moving into the future. But yeah, the young people I work with, I think it's about empowering them. It's about making them feel like, they will be in a place like all the other people that they're working for eventually. It just takes time and it takes a humbleness and a willingness to, admit your mistakes and know your weaknesses and turn them into strengths eventually. And you can do that. We all have the capability, but it takes a certain personality to be, self-reflective and also to not take things too personally. We all have to learn. It's always learning. Well, none of us stop learning. There's no end to that process. You don't get to a place where you're like, I know it all. I guess I'll just work until I retire. Everybody. The one thing I learned, I heard from Hans Zimmer, the score, the composer who did Interstellar and Batman and all these movies. He admitted in an interview recently that I saw, he goes, I go in every film completely cold, knowing nothing. I don't know what I'm going to do. He admits to a complete starting over with every project. And eventually, with spending time with the material and starting to feel out what the characters are going through and what the story is really trying to say between the lines, that the music will find him and he'll start to be the vessel, the conduit to showing it to people, like, okay, this is the one you're meant to hear, this is the music you should be listening to. And so he doesn't claim ownership of it so much as discovery of it. And I think that's really inspirational to hear stories about guys like Hans and others who just are good at listening and have developed skills that when they hear the right thing, they react to it and they start to employ the techniques that they've learned. And that's a really important part of being creative, is knowing a lot of different ways to accomplish telling a story, and then listening and appreciating the way this story is telling you it should be told, and then employing the techniques now that you have learned. And that's really the best way to be creative, is not to say, I have a particular way of working and I'm going to make this story fit the way I work. I've never subscribed to that. I believe you need to be a ambassador of the ultimate vision, and it's your job to be the guide the best way that material tells you to make it. And hopefully you have the skills to be able to do that and convey it in the way the material says, this is the best way to tell my story. How are you going to do it? You know, what are you going to do to make this really effective and land with an audience that is the way this material should be interpreted? And yeah, I think that's always an incredible process to be a part of, is let you discover the story. Don't try to force yourself to make it the way you believe it should necessarily be, because you already have a preconceived notion. Let the story tell you what it should become.
That's really interesting and very important for people to note, because sometimes you do want to put in maybe the essence of yourself or your beliefs or your background or whatever it may be. And sometimes the particular project doesn't necessarily really call for that, right?
Yeah, I think some projects are very much a work in progress. You know, you start with an idea, and Making the Monster was very much like that in the beginning. We really didn't know anything other than sort of the premise. Like, we want to tell the story of the production of Jaws from the characters, from the crew's point of view. And we needed to take time to let it reveal to us what's the best way to do that. And I think that, yeah, ultimately, you need to be reactive. Don't be, don't go in and say your style is the way to tell any story that you're used to doing. Let it be the way that the story tells you it should be, and react to it. And it's a much more beautiful experience, I think. It's much more, it's organic. It becomes one that is now much more like, learning the way, if you're a farmer and you learn that, this particular crop is going to grow best in this kind of sunlight with this kind of water and this kind of fertilizer, and it creates the most bloom out of your sunflowers, as a metaphor. You react to it. You're not, sunflower is going to tell you the best way it grows, and you just need to respect that and cater to it.
That's right, exactly. Is there anything that you wish could be a lot of things, I think, for all of us, that you wish you knew then that you know now within this career and this industry and everything that you've been doing, David?
For a long time, I worked in commercials for a while too. I did advertising, and it was just part of my path to getting into creative work. And I thought it was a place I would ultimately be satisfied because the money was very good, and it was fun to say, hey, I worked on a McDonald's ad, or I did Nike, or I did whatever brand that you brought up at the time. To me, it's not. Don't be seduced by the names. Don't let brand recognition be what drives you. Don't say that you're associated with a particular well-known thing. It's coincidental that I'm part of a project about Jaws, which I know is a very popular franchise, but it is, I grew up with it. I started with it, and this is where I find myself most comfortably coming back to, because the material is said. It's a story that should be told. But if you're getting into media and entertainment, or film and television production, or even online production, I think let your instincts be your guide for material that you feel best about working with. Don't let popularity be the driving force. We obviously want audiences to be interested in the stories we're trying to tell, and so we do want there to be a certain popularity to that, telling that story, and that people are familiar with it, or they will become familiar with it. but don't be seduced by name recognition. Your skills and your talents can be applied in many areas to material that nobody's ever heard of. And there's plenty of people making ads for McDonald's and Wendy's and Starbucks or whatever. There's those will always be there, and they'll there'll be other people working on them, and it's great sometimes to just be able to work on quality work for a while and make money. But ultimately, I think you want to be proud of the work you do, and you want to tell stories that connect to people. And I don't know a lot of people that feel like commercials connect to them emotionally. They enjoy them. I love the Old Spice commercial from the Super Bowl a number of years ago.
Yeah, maybe years ago when they had more jingles. Jingles really sort of, you remembered certain commercials because of the jingles and because of just the way that they were produced back then. Now they're just sort of like a quick blur in a way sometimes.
Well, advertising has changed, and people aren't watching things live on air. They're putting things on, they're streaming them and so forth. So advertising has gone through quite a bit of an upheaval, and there's been a lot of changes that advertisers have had to, like the Super Bowl is the one place that people spend a lot of money on ads because people are watching in real time. I don't mean to knock advertising. I guess I'm using it as an example of like, I did for a while. I was guilty of saying, I want you to know that my work is good because it's related to these brand names. And so that should be enough for you to know that my work is appreciated and is at a professional level. But the work should speak for itself. That's all. And,
right.
Whatever that work is, I've seen a lot of examples of people making fan films of material, of creating their own brand new content, not based on anything else that anybody's ever created for intellectual property. And some of it really just blows me away in the talent. And it's all completely new to me, but I see the eye, I see the care and the amount of time that I know how long it takes to make something good. It's like, when you work in film and television, you start to realize that, that didn't just happen. They didn't just shoot it that way. And the editors spent a week with it and they just put it on television. A lot of this stuff is, months or years even of trial and error and perfecting techniques or fixing mistakes or making choices between 5 different ways to do it and finally arriving at the one that you didn't think you were going to get to. Your mind's eye is like sees the perfect thing before you shoot it and edit it. And then you realize, well, it's a process where you have to keep appreciating what you actually have and not what you intended to make.
Exactly right. I mean, that's one of the reasons why and how this show was born 10 weeks ago as of today, having worked, working in television and radio professionally all these years. So many people wanted me to create something that was me just direct to the audience in this intimate way that's a little bit more long form. So we sort of built this home studio set, which we've tweaked and been working on. We've even got George Burns with us as our sidekick. A lot of the TV nostalgia is here. But
say goodnight, Gracie. Good night.
Say goodnight, Gracie. Exactly. But it's something that, right, is born out of the technology, but also so many people wanting me to do it. And then when I launched it 10 weeks ago, it has been extraordinary. People are telling me, it reminds them, because we have an audience, around the world, which is great. We hear from all these comments. We have like 50, 60, 70 comments here. They say that it touches them. They say there's a couple of people, they say that they're in pain physically when they watch the show. It sort of takes their pain away because of the conversations. I really believe in the art of conversation, which has been lost in recent years. So, the Dick Cavetts, the Merv Griffins, the Johnny Carsons, the Mike Douglas, all of that, with some of the modern sensibilities of today as well. So when I put this together 10 weeks ago, a lot of people were like, wow, this is amazing. This is cool. This is, because we do a lot of different segments on location. We do food, we do music, we do all the cool stuff. But it's just the fact that we turned on the lights, built this out of the home studio, and here we are live, because I really love live. I love the element of live. Anything can happen, anything can go wrong, because I've been on many sets where lights burst and talent didn't show up and sets fell down, and you've seen it all. Making the monster is a good example of that. But I've seen it in these live situations, and just created this out of a response and a love for what I do, like you say, in communicating with an audience. And it's just been wonderful. And again, this is just almost the sign of the times, right?
Yeah, I think and I didn't realize you had only been on this long, and so I congratulate you. I think it's a wonderful thing that you're doing, and I completely appreciate how the immediacy of doing a live show connects in a way that doing something pre-recorded does not accomplish. Um, but I think that's the wonderful thing about the media technology today and the internet and so forth is this connection to people around the globe that was only afforded to us, for the last say 20 or so years, that the technology has now made it so that if anybody wants to start up a television program, that they have an audience to come to and guests to appear on from their location. And especially in the time of COVID-19, the ability to have these conversations continue to happen and to connect to people, we need it more than ever in some ways. And so I think that this is a really wonderful time. It's just like filmmaking when Francis Ford Coppola, when he was making Apocalypse Now, or one of the films, like from The Godfather to Apocalypse Now or something, is like, someday somebody's going to make a film based on the fact that they've got the technology they can buy at the corner store and not just have to go and get from a professional rental house and have to go to film school. And, the tools are available. The ability to shoot 4K video on your iPhone is now here. And, if you've got the eye and you've got the right story to tell, there's no reason you can't do it. I mean, obviously cost is a factor in being able to tell certain stories, but there are incredible stories that are being made all around the planet with people who don't have Hollywood budgets and barely have well-made independent film budgets, but they've got the stories and the tools are right in your hand. You're talking through it a lot of the time in communicating with the rest of the world. And so that's been an exciting development, I think, to see, is that we all have the access to be media makers these days and to create beautiful stuff that we can share with anybody. And it just means finding a way to connect to people with that content, and people should embrace that, enjoy it. You don't need to have a Hollywood studio back you to be able to tell great stories. Tell your stories, start making them. If it's a documentary, you can make those now. If it's a dramatic short film about a couple of people in a home, and you want to make it hire family members to be the actors, the important thing is start the process.
Right.
Start the process. They don't all have to be Oscar winners. Just make things that you learn from, and
Exactly.
then you see how people react to, and then the next thing will be building upon that, and you'll love the process. Trust me.
Yeah.
Just start.
Absolutely. Well, like even putting this together, because we have guests, 5 nights a week. We do the show 7 nights a week live, Monday through Sunday. There's no, time off necessarily, and in conjunction with my professional work. And it's really been a blessing and a joy. And it almost took this window of opportunity to do it because, like you, I'm always busy running around. I have to be on a set or in a studio or on the air or whatever the case may be. So you always say, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it on the weekend. Maybe I'll put it together. And you don't. And then this time that we've had, which I think is a time where it's sort of a reset and a time where hopefully we can rise out of the ashes, like I said, better. But a lot of innovation and entrepreneurship and creativity is happening right now during this time that is very positive. As much as there's a lot of horrific scenarios going on, there's still a lot of positive. And you could see that there's people that have been hungering, thirsting for positivity and inspiration and empowerment for a long time. There was this undercurrent, and now it's starting to bubble up. And people, I think, are going to prefer that as we go through this together, right?
Absolutely. I think, particularly now, there's a lot happening, especially for our country that, challenges a lot of people's hope for the future to be a better place than the present. I think that we went through these challenges before. A lot of people make the equations of 1968 and the civil rights movement and so forth to what's going on in our country now. We survived that, and we were able to come out into a period of, real renaissance. Hopefully we're going through the same sort of process now. And I think every once in a while, a reset and an appreciation for what we have and not resting on our laurels, and finding, that the most important things are, is finding harmony and balance in things. And right now things are out of balance, but it gets restored. Pendulum swings both ways. And you just need to be strong enough and patient enough to sort of wait for that to occur. And stay close to the ones you love, and keep the most important things, the assets of your survivability intact, and be patient and appreciate the beauty in the world that money can't buy, and things will get better. It just takes some time and some faith.
God, you sound like you're taking words right out of my mouth. It's the same words I say all the time. It's really amazing. It must have been those haircuts back then. That started it all. That was the inspiration for how we think about life today, right?
Maybe. Yeah, it's all get the bowl cut. That's where all the wisdom comes from. It's like bangs down to here.
I just want to show there's some wonderful things coming in here from greetings from Iowa and hello from Sylvania, Ohio. Christopher said you were a cute kid when you were a kid. Let's see. One of the best movies ever made, of course, Jaws. My honest opinion, almost killed Spielberg, then ended up making his career.
Yeah,
you didn't have to be. You didn't have to be a kid to be scared. Willie is in Holland. She's saying hi, David.
Hello, Willie.
I tell you, you talk about dedication. She takes naps during the day just so she can get up to watch our show. Because when the show starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, David, it's 1 a.m. in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So she naps in the day. Oh, this is funny. I wonder if Ethel Merman screamed in the theater while seeing Jaws. Could you imagine? That would take the roof off.
That would be an entertaining scream to listen to, certainly.
Yeah. Merlin in Innerkip, Ontario, Canada says, hey, David. Renee in Iowa says, hi, David.
Hi,
Ernestine
Renee.
in North Carolina says, hi, David.
Hey,
Christopher in Ohio says the same thing. Karen lives in New Hampshire. Hi, Jim, David, and everyone. Being from New England, Jaws was a riveting movie. Scared me to go to the beach.
Not alone, Karen.
That's it. Sharon in Connecticut says hello. The movie scared me, but it was incredible. Rennie in New York City, who's a singer performer, she's actually going to be coming on as a guest Thursday. Scared her as well. What do we have? Still in my mind, was sitting by the waterless foil. I saw a black head swimming and screamed, what is that? Someone in back of me said, that's my black lab. So it leaves an impression, you know, when you think about it. The theme song, terrifying even now. It is amazing, all the things they go through to make a movie. Absolutely. Let's see. Marianne Kelly in New Jersey, who is a life coach and a medium and great person. Great movie. Favorite line, we're going to need a bigger boat.
I'll just tell a quick anecdote about that. That was actually Roy Scheider said that line because the producers of Jaws were very cheap. And Carl Gottlieb tells the story of the fact that everybody on the crew was saying that every time they were trying to do something with the shark, they always needed a bigger boat to be able to accomplish what the director was asking for. So by the time they got to that scene where Roy says, you're going to need a bigger boat, it was a line everybody on the crew was saying over and over by trying to tell the producers, we need more money to actually get this film shot. So we need a bigger boat. And so they put it in the film as a result. And it's a classic line, but it has a lot of history behind why it was thrown into the film.
That's amazing. See, Marianne Kelly, you got your nickel's worth there. That's fantastic. Great career in the entertainment industry as well. Ernestine says we have lots of sharks off the coast of North Carolina. Occasionally whales have been spotted as well. Mm-hmm. No sharks here in Iowa, maybe a cornfield that you can disappear into next to a baseball field as well.
Right.
And Marcia Lyon, who's from Connecticut but lives in Massachusetts, says she was on Martha's Vineyard Island for the summer the original Jaws was filmed. She remembers seeing one of the sharks being moved by land and hearing about the issues with the mechanical shark. She's watching right now on YouTube at Jim Masters TV. That's cool, huh? So she was actually there.
You might have driven right by me at some point.
Did they have to rope off some of the island for the filming at all? Or they leave it open?
There was occasionally the need to basically create closed sets and block off certain traffic and redirect. But, the vineyard only has so many roads that go to certain places. And so there was, it was challenging to do that. And that's why they tried to get as much of the shooting on land done before many people showed up for the summer. So it was tricky. But there are scenes in like in Edgartown when, the let Polly do the printing. That street goes the opposite direction. You're not supposed to drive up the street the way Chief Brody does. But right. For the film, they locked it off and let him drive up that direction. But it's only one way in the other direction. So you see that they had to lock off parts of the streets to be able to film scenes like that.
Absolutely. And Renee says, all that time spent making the movie was worth it. Great movie, very realistic. Hi, Jim and David. Joseph is in Stamford, Connecticut. Hi, Jim and David. That was a great idea to feature a true behind the scenes. He's watching on YouTube at Jim Masters TV. And that's interesting, huh? What about a comedy movie about Jaws? Jaws lives.
There was, another anecdote. The third film of Jaws was actually proposed to be a National Lampoon film called Jaws 3 People Zero.
Right.
And Spielberg got wind of the fact they were going to go that way and was very against the concept of doing a parody film in National Lampoon style. So they did try to do that, and it was quickly shut down. And I'm glad it happened, because I think a comedy parody of Jaws would have just been atrocious of an idea.
Mm. What do you think of the Sharknado concept and series and all with Sharknado?
Sharknado is so self-aware as a ridiculous franchise that it works. If you want to be ridiculous about sharks, putting sharks in a tornado and then having characters use two sharks to electrically stimulate somebody from a heart attack and back to life. Ian Ziering from 90210 has got a whole new career out of those films. So more power to him.
Linda Hutchinson says, amazing how they built the sets and they looked so real, which is great. And she also adds in, you were both cute boys. It's those haircuts. I'd say the haircuts, they've come back. I mean, Justin Bieber's tried them. Interesting interview. Now I want to watch Jaws again, which is fantastic.
Always worth watching.
And then, of course, they were talking about the drive-ins. You still love drive-ins, remembering the drive-ins, going to the drive-ins with the grandkids and so many others. It's nice when you get the instant. I'm very viewer and listener centric, so I love getting the viewer feedback and sharing it with the guests and everybody. Austin Fields says, this is a fascinating interview with David.
Oh, thanks, Austin.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much, Austin. This show has an element of storytelling, heartfelt communication, sharing. David, thank you for sharing. So valuable, especially at this time.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that.
Really nice. Eileen Barker's in Australia, and I love her because she is in Western Australia, in the Midlands, just east of Perth, she said. And she uses the word ripper when it's like a fantastic time, a grand time. She goes, hi, Jim and David. That Jaws whale was so on edge of chair, super ripper.
I love those local vernaculars. Yeah.
And, oh boy, that is funny. 3 a.m. I am awake, but my eyes almost close. Willie in Holland. She's a real trooper. Jim, this has been a very interesting and informative conversation with David tonight. I know, makes you think like it was a Dick Cavett episode, doesn't it? While you must be tired, so good to be here with you. And she's talking about Willie and Netherlands. Sure. Very tired, but it is very interesting. Yes, she's very dedicated. A few more quick comments coming in here. Great interview with David Bigelow, Jacqueline Ficara Caputo. And this is a great show. We appreciate that. David, you have captured the essence of conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really nice. Great interview again, as always. Appreciate that. Rennie says, very interesting, good insights. Thank you. And David, great interview again tonight. Linda Hutchinson, and lots of smiles from Willie in Holland. So she's still up. Let's see. It is crazy now, but we need to keep positive and know that it'll get better. Hello from San Antonio, Texas. Hello from Kathleen in New York City. Good interview.
Thank you.
Marianne Kelly, another form of interesting interview. Oh, that is funny. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Sharknado is Jaws meets Twister. LOL.
I would say, that puts it in a nutshell.
So again, if people want to learn more, David, and we appreciate all of this great time, these amazing stories, and the time that you shared with us. And again, kindred spirits in both working in this medium, especially of television. Thoroughly looking forward to keep me posted and all of us posted on when this is going to be airing. And if people, are you still looking for funding? Are you still looking? Is there a site? Is there anything where people can help support it at all? Or is that much more of a larger picture now?
Well, the Making the Monster is an extremely large production, and while we would appreciate any kind of support that we receive, I think that by and large the film is going to need the underwriting of the traditional channels of film and television financing. Return of the Orca, that project, we are looking at some creative opportunities for people to maybe be able to support that as a charitable endeavor. The mission of that boat obviously being what it is. We are looking at opportunities, and we'll have announcements coming up later this month that might be able to be ways for people to be informed about how they can be a part of the project, and be made aware of when the boat is finally available and on the ocean, and hopefully people can come and actually see it in person, and get out on the water and pretend they're Matt Hooper. We'd love to be able to have people enjoy it. And we have some things up our sleeve about ways that they can be involved. So, just stay glued to our social media channels, Making the Monster on Facebook and Instagram. And we will have announcements there coming up in the next few weeks. So we look forward to having any new followers and people who want to stay apprised of what we're up to. We'd love to have you aboard, and we'll stay in touch and make sure that you're the first ones to hear about what we're up to. So please go ahead and follow us online, and we'll make sure you're right up front when it comes to what we have to announce.
Fantastic. And again, the Google Maps, how do they access that too for the Jaws locations?
If you go to our Instagram account, instagram.com/Making the Monster, all one word, Making the Monster, and it's in our bio. You'll see link in bio, and you can click on that there. But you can also, it's gotten around quite well online. A lot of articles have picked it up. Filmmaker magazine covered it, and so forth. So if you just simply Google Jaws location guide or Ultimate Jaws location guide, you'll see it pop right up in most of the first few article links that you'll see. And those articles all have a link to the actual map landing page. It is a Google site, so you'll see Google in the URL. And you just click on that, and it'll give you the instructions on how to view the guide free of charge.
That is fantastic. Well, David, thanks for all of the time. Thanks for taking us behind the scenes, just a little bit of the making of Jaws and all the other work you've done. Again, you've recognized, I'm talking to the audience, recognized a lot of his work through all of these incredible productions through PBS as well. You're talking American Experience and Nova and Frontline and many, many more, and continued success. And as you get closer to, this whole thing coming to be, and any time before you, the door's always open. I'd love a conversation again. We don't have to go this long unless you want to. I'm a conversationalist,
Sure.
but no commercials in between. It's like public television, no commercials. Sure. The door's always open, and we welcome you, David. It was a real pleasure and an honor to have you here. Thanks for all of your incredible body of work and continued success. We toast on this show. We always raise a glass, and we toast, and we say thank you for taking the time to, Carol Burnett pulls on her ear. I do the toast. Thanks for being with us. And our friend George says, good night, David.
Good night, George.
So you got George here. David, thanks again. It was really a pleasure. And we wish you continued success with all of these amazing projects, and hope that you'll be back with us again soon. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
I had a great time, Jim. Thank you very much. And it was really wonderful to be able to appear and share the stories that we're wanting to tell. And a great audience. I really enjoyed, being able to hear back from people in real time. That's not something I usually get the privilege of doing. It's usually pre-recorded. So being part of a live experience is really great. And I enjoyed it thoroughly. So thanks again for having me on. It was a wonderful time.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll chat again soon. Maybe lunch in Boston over at WGBH.
Why not?
That's it. Take care. You have a good night, David. Thanks for all the time.
You too. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye now. A very special guest, David Bigelow. Again, really amazing when you get a chance to really hear these stories and the behind the scenes, wouldn't you say? Absolutely fantastic. Again, he is working on this phenomenal project, Making the Monster, which is going to be talking about and telling the story of the making of Jaws, one of the most legendary movies in American cinematic history, a movie that obviously from a lot of you who have been watching this broadcast right now, you guys have been moved by that movie. And some of you never saw the movie before. Go check it out. But you may have a nightmare or two, like a lot of us did while watching it. Thanks, David, for sharing all the interesting information of Jaws. And he thanks you. I thank you. Thanks again. Bye, David. Bye, David. Thank you. And a great interview, just so captured by the insights. My pleasure to present that to you. Always, we have an opportunity to go a little deeper. You know, this isn't just 5 minutes of, hey, tell me about. I like to really go deep with these conversations. And it's, not all the shows are as long as this. Sometimes we do an hour. Sometimes we do a little bit less. But this was a cool one. You really got a chance to learn about the essence of the guy, but also his work. Again, very affiliated for many years with public television and some really cool specials, and as well as legendary series Frontline and Nova, American Experience. And he was working on the Pan Am project, working on this project too, Making the Monster. So I'll keep you posted as I hear more as well. We'll keep you posted here on the show. Truly enjoyed this. Thank you so much. I was lucky to have grown up on Martha's Vineyard Summers 2, watching on YouTube. You and I have been involved with public television many years, haven't we, Marcia? You've answered many a phone. Well, I host the on-air segments. Great interview as well. Another informative and interesting interview. I want to scroll a little bit back as well, now that we have wrapped our conversation with the guest, and just talk to some of you real quick before we wrap the show up. And Mary, sometimes we want to just say hello to you guys and hope you had a fabulous 4th of July. We had a wonderful 4th of July along the southern New England coast. I posted some pictures on the Facebook page. Thanks for all those nice comments. Hello to Mary Ann. Hello to Merlin. Hello to Mary Ryan in Connecticut. Everybody doing well. I hope you're doing well as well. And happy Monday, Renee, the new Mr. Rogers. Hello, Jimbo. Hope you all had a great 4th of July weekend. Absolutely. Love all the love that you guys talk about, communal and being communicators. Love all of the love you guys show each other as well. Trying to stay cool while social distancing. We went out for about 2 hours and we were walking along the coast, and it was probably 91 degrees, but it was absolutely beautiful today. And then I have coming up on one of the shows soon, I've got some fantastic on-location spots that we went to, that we filmed, that I'm going to be sharing with you here on the Jim Masters Show Live very soon. Really beautiful, breathtaking locations over this past 4th of July holiday, some of which have not been shared on Facebook or YouTube or anything yet. I'm saving it for the show, and saving a few cool things too as well. Marilyn in Innerkip, Ontario, Canada says hello, and Ernestine, Jim and friends, hope everyone had a great 4th of July. We sure did, and I hope you did as well. And Christopher had said I always go to the piano and play those lower notes on the piano that sound like Jaws, which is wonderful. Here is Holland, and so much more love. We really appreciate all this great love, and I like showing the guests some of your comments too, because like David said, they don't always get a chance to see, a lot of shows are taped, pre-recorded, not aired live. And we just did like a 2.5 hour show live. Wow. But it was cool. Didn't feel that long. Never really does. And good show. Have a great night. We appreciate that. We're going to get ready to wrap. I do have to tell you, an amazing guest tomorrow night. She's very excited to be here. I actually met her at the Friars Club in New York City at a very special event, which was celebrating the body of work of composer David Friedman, who has been not only a great friend and still is a great friend, but also a wonderful composer of extraordinary music, a lot of which you've heard on Broadway and in movies and film. And he wrote a book called We Can Be Kind. He runs the Thought Exchange, which is a terrific series as well. And this person was at Friars Club with her husband, and she's a brilliant performer. Her name is Karen Mason. She's an extraordinary, legendary Broadway star, actress, and singing sensation. In addition to cabaret performances, Karen Mason joins us here exclusively live on the Jim Masters Show Live tomorrow night. That is Tuesday night, right here, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And it's going to be awesome. And I hope you can join us. She's going to be performing live here on the show as well, which is going to be terrific. And she's got an incredible voice. She's a dear friend. She's got an incredible voice. And again, we initially met over dinner with like 30 other people in the creative arts the night at the Friars Club in New York City, celebrating the wonderful work and music of David Friedman. Karen Mason going to be here tomorrow night live, exclusively on the Jim Masters Show Live. Hey, gang, you know the drill. If you want to see past episodes, all you have to do is go to the YouTube channel. And hello to everybody watching on YouTube. I really appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel. That really helps the channel big time. Tell your friends. The more that people actually click on that red subscription button, the more people get a chance to see all these great episodes. So share the links with your friends. Have a watch party if you're watching on Facebook at Jim Masters TV. Enjoy. I hope you guys had a fantastic 4th of July. Thanks for all the comments over the weekend when we were posting video on Instagram. You can see some of the video on Instagram and Twitter, Jim Masters TV, and some of the photos. And also on my Facebook, the fan page, Jim Masters TV. You can see some of the 4th of July stuff as well. Thanks for telling me all your stories about your 4th of July experiences. And I hope you guys had a wonderful 4th of July holiday. The weather here was absolutely beautiful, and we were along the southern New England coast, and it was breathtaking. It was well deserved. I hope you had great weather where you are, because, you know, going through everything we've all been going through, some nice weather was definitely in order, and it was really, really nice. Again, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you can, like the Facebook page, share. We are live, and we simulcast every single night. 7, except for this past weekend. We wanted to be with family and friends. So I'm glad you guys allowed us to slip away and be with family and friends. And many of you were actually posting saying, enjoy the time with family and friends. So we appreciate that. But we did miss you, of course. Thought about you. And thanks for all the great comments that came in, even while we were enjoying the holidays with our family. Your friends are here, George and Jeannie. And yes, Silver's here. I know you look for Silver. So Silver's there. He's been watching, riveted by the interview with David Bigelow, and just riveted about Jaws. He says, hey, when are we going to talk about a movie that involves a dog? So we'll see about that. And of course, Jimmy is here as well. And he's just been riveted to the broadcast as well. Jeannie's asleep in the bottle, so we won't disturb Jeannie. And of course, your friend George, which all the guests love too. You can't go wrong with my sidekick, George Burns. He says a wonderful good night to all of you. The extended version. Some of the shows get a little extended. Some of the shows are quicker. But hey, we're building something together. This is the Jim Masters Show Live Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show Series. And I hope you enjoy the art of conversation and entertainment and lifestyle and everything else that we celebrate here on this broadcast. Again, we celebrate and we thank our very special guest, David Bigelow, television producer and creator, as well as film producer extraordinaire, and for all of his body of work. And we wish him continued success with Making the Monster and all of the projects that he's a part of. I thank you for joining us as well. A couple more comments coming in before we call it a night. This was a long show, but you know what? We extended the show because David was a great conversationalist, and I really loved this conversation with him. You know, some people, they talk less and it's a shorter show, and some people, they just love it. And he understands the art of conversation, which is what I like to facilitate. But because we were off on the weekend, we wanted to have a little extended show for all of you. So Willie, I cannot believe that you're still up. Willie, okay, Willie. We must do this. All those who know that Willie, if you're just joining us, Willie is one of our faithful fans in the Netherlands, there in Holland and Europe. So there you go, Willie. There's your flowers. I know you missed them over the weekend when we weren't on, because we were with family for 4th of July holiday. So there you go, Willie. Thank you for all your message and comments during the course of the day. We appreciate all the comments from everybody. We appreciate all the love. Continue to tell everybody about this show. Continue to share the links. The show is growing by leaps and bounds. And we haven't done the viewer of the week yet. So we're going to do it this weekend. And boy, do we have some cool guests coming up, as I mentioned, all week long. Amazing guests. And even more than that, the fact that you're here. Love the guests, but the fact that you're here and I'm here as your host every night at 7 p.m. Eastern, live, 4 p.m. Pacific, worldwide on Facebook and on YouTube at Jim Masters TV. It's always a blessing. So good night to every single one of you. And good night, everyone. Stay safe. God bless all. Ernestine in beautiful North Carolina. Good show. Have a great night. Thank you, Kathleen. We appreciate it. And again, Willie says good night, everyone. Good night, Willie. And Renee, thanks for another great show, Jim. Hope everyone has a great night and day. And Renee, thanks for posting those links for more information about, you didn't have to do that, but I appreciate you doing that, about making the movie, making the monster, and some of the other things that David was talking about this evening, in reference to Jaws and so much more. So bye-bye to you and the breadbasket in Iowa. I am your host, Jim Masters. We are thanking you for your time this time till next time, which will be 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. One more comment coming in, slipping under the wire here. I try to be helpful. And yes, you are. Thanks again, gang. Always a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much, Willie. Right back at you. We appreciate that. All the love coming in all the time here. So we're going to wrap. And the extended version of the Jim Master Show Live. Have a great night. We'll see you here tomorrow. Nice and smooth. 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific live. YouTube at Jim Masters TV, Facebook at Jim Masters TV. All right. Thanks, gang, for hanging with us this long. We really appreciate it. It means a lot. And I'm sure you've learned quite a few cool things from our very special guest, David Bigelow. I sure did. And we hope to have him back again one of these days. It'll be a real pleasure. We'll see you tomorrow night. Take care. Love you all. It's a blessing having you with us. And all I can say is good night. See you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.